We're live.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Council. Good morning, staff and the general public. Welcome to our County Council meeting of April the 19th. And we'll call the meeting to order by resolution.
It's moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Wirt, that the meeting of the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry be hereby called to order.
Thank you. You heard the motion. All in favor? I lost most of them. I presume motion's carried. Can I ask for a roll call, Madam Clerk, please?
Councillor Armstrong?
Councillor Armstrong, present.
Councillor Byvelds? Councillor Fraser?
Present.
Councillor Gardner?
Present.
Councillor Laundrie?
Present.
Councillor McDonald?
Present.
Councillor McGillis? Warden Prevost?
Present.
Councillor Smith?
Present.
Councillor Warden?
Present.
Councillor Wirt?
Present.
Councillor Williams?
Present.
Okay, thank you. And adoption of the agenda. Is there any additions to the agenda? Not seeing none. Is there a motion for the agenda? Oh, Lyle, did you have a question?
I was just, my apologies. I can only see, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Me too was the same. Okay, Madam Clerk, if you would.
It's moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Byvelds, that Council approve the agenda.
And you heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Number 3 is the closure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Not seeing none. Number 4, the adoption of the minutes of March 15th, March 25th, March 29th, and April 7th and April 8th.
It's moved by Councillor McGillis, seconded by Councillor Gardner, that the minutes of the meetings, including the in-camera minutes and public meeting minutes of the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry, held March 15th, March 25th, March 29th, April 7th, and April 8th, 2021, be adopted as circulated.
All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. We have no delegations this morning, so we'll move right into action requests, corporate services, proposed amendments to the regional incentive program. Tim can speak on this report. Mr. Simpson, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Warden. Good morning, members of council. And before I get started on that, she's in the top tile on my screen, but I want to introduce Tara Kirkpatrick. Tara is our new manager of economic development. Some of you, I'm sure, know Tara and have worked with her, and some of you may not have had a chance to meet her. So there she is virtually, so waving. So Tara did a lot of work on this report, and I just want to thank her for the work that she did. We did a lot of work in the fall and through the winter on this, getting it to this point, and then she picked it up when she started and moved it forward to this point. So I'll just run through quickly the report. Is there any, you have it all, is there any specific, would you like me to run through, I guess, the details, which I can, or anything specific, or highlight any of the details? There's quite a list of changes there, so I can run through them all. I can run through specific ones, or whatever the desire of council is, Mr. Warden.
Thank you. Is there any request from any members of council, something they really want to see? We've all had the report. Maybe just run through the details of the changes, I guess, Mr. Simpson, if you would.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, I'm just getting my report up here. So essentially, the changes were made for various reasons. They were process improvements. They were to make the document more user-friendly, not only for applicants, but for the staff at the local municipalities that are working with it. We're trying to increase efficiencies, and we're really trying to target the investments to those types of developments in the private sector that we know are going to give the best return on investment. So if you turn to page 24 of your agenda, there's a good overview there of some of the changes. Section 1.2, the original language is there. The proposed language, really, it's just to make those. It's like the report said, it's a more organic fit. We're just kind of changing the language a little bit to to bring tourism and agri-tourism in a little closer together. So that's a language change. On 1.3, that is the section talking about the trail network. We had quite a robust discussion about that at the public meeting a couple of weeks ago. The review committee is of the opinion that trails have been funded in the past, and moving forward, the focus should be less on trails and more on some of the other items that the committee wants to focus on, given where we are at this point. So there's been an investment in the past, and the committee's recommending that we look at different things at this point. So delete the trails. Section 2.0, again, there was a robust discussion around should quasi-municipal or municipal organizations, including groups like conservation authorities, be funded. The consensus of the committee was no, because they've got the ability to either raise taxation directly or levy municipalities that can tax. So the thought was to remove that section and focus primarily on focus exclusively, if you will, on the private sector. So that came out. The next is changes to the terms of reference. That's the document that guides who's on the committee, how it's approved. And the changes there are you'll see the current structure and the proposed structure. 3 members going from 2 members of county council to 3 members of county council, including the warden for a 2-year term. So that would be concurrent with other lay appointments. 2 lay appointees, and those ads have gone out. So county council, the lay appointments committee would approve those for a 2-year term. And then county staff members would not be on the committee, but they would bring the applications forward and they would participate in the discussion if they're asked. So again, that's to improve how the committee works and to get around some of the challenges I think that we had in the past. So we're recommending some changes there to the terms of reference. The next one is for clarity, a new section around. You'll see there, all grants approved for a single project will not exceed $50,000 per property. So that's capping it. That's making it more clear about what the maximum is, because applications often have more than one element. So I want to improve my property, and it's got element A, B, or C. So we're just making it clear that 50K is the max for that. Again, section 2.2 is for clarity. That is providing some flexibility for applicants to, after they've started construction or gotten approval, they can circle back and get their, if they spent any money ahead of time on feasibility design or study grants, as you see there, that can be reimbursed. The thought there is that oftentimes you're required to do this legwork up front, and if you can recoup those costs, if you have a successful application, that makes sense. You've put the money in, so you shouldn't be penalized, for doing that, because you're going to have to do it anyway as part of the application process. So that was included. 2.2, and you'll notice a lot of these are for clarity. 2.2 W, that's just how it's just clarifying how it's done in terms of how invoices are paid and what the maximum is. Just to let applicants know upfront what the process is going to be. Section 2.3.1, that's around property improvements and expansions. And the background on that is that the way that the program was written in the past, it wasn't 100% clear that it had to be an expansion or renovation within an existing building. What this one says, there might be instances where you can have a new build on an existing property that's complementary to what you want to do. So that essentially what that section says is that you can include that as part of your application. Section 2.3.1 talks about parking lots, and the thought with the committee at that was that previously, some parking lot improvements as standalone improvements had been approved. The committee felt that in certain instances, parking lot improvements are important, but they should be made as part of a bigger application. So you can't just come forward and say, I want to asphalt my parking lot. You can say, I'm going to renovate the upstairs and change my windows, and I want to enhance my parking lot as well. So that's still allowed, but you can't use them as a standalone. Section 2.3.3, again, that's for clarity, providing the $20,000 for the building under the building conversion and expansion grant for those for projects under 5,000 square feet. So you see those two bullets there. They provide it's a modification to provide good clarity, especially in the context of the other changes that I mentioned, just for more or less for applicants in terms of they know exactly what the parameters of the program is before they apply for it. Section 4, roofed accommodations. One of the pillars of the program is to promote and enhance roofed accommodations around the county. As you know, we don't have a lot of permanent places for people to stay. We have a lot of attractions, but part of the reason for the plan is to try to stimulate the development of roofed accommodations throughout the county. So this is you'll see the original language and the proposed language. It's just to bring clarity around what are actually eligible for funding and what aren't. And I'll just read the proposed language. It says roof accommodations are defined as 4-season, so year-round, short-term, so that would be a rental, permanent fixed roofed accommodation, so that's not a tent type thing, obviously something that's permanent, roofed accommodation within or as an extension to existing buildings and including hotels, motels, bed and breakfast. Again, like a lot of the changes that are being brought forward, it's to provide clarity around. If I'm thinking about applying, I know exactly what the rules are ahead of time. So still it promotes and facilitates those types of projects, but it provides clarity. So those are, in a nutshell, those are the changes, Mr. Warden. Just going forward, we're reviewing this matter today. We had the statutory public meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I know a lot of you were at that meeting. We've got these targeted changes. Presuming County Council wants to go forward today and approve the amendments as proposed, it'll be adopted today. And then what will happen is it's going to be forwarded to all members of all local clerks, and it's going to be going forward to each local municipality for review and approval. And provided that's done and there's no appeals, we're proceeding as if this was an official plan amendment. Presuming there's no appeals, then that regional incentives document, as you have now, will form an integral part of your own community improvement plan. So once that's in place, we're good to go. And presuming everything goes well, we're looking at a June intake date to start receiving applications for 2021. And as you know, Mr. Warden, the $250,000 was allocated to the program this year. So I ran through it quite quickly, but either myself or Tara would be happy to answer any questions if there are. And we're hoping to receive approval today so we can start the process to forward to all local municipalities in the county so that their councils can review the document and that we can move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for the presentation. Is there any questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Williams, then Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Originally, at the public consultation level of things, myself and our Councillor Jeff Manley from North Glengarry Council did speak about our concerns about removing the trails from the grant program. Since then, I was talking to Tara, and she actually gave me, a very good explanation of the rationale behind that. And so I don't see it as much of a concern, particularly since apparently there will be consideration to moving it over to the tourism grant. I'm just wondering, Tara, are you in a position to expand on that and explain that a little bit at this point?
Good morning. So as I had mentioned, we are going through a review process later this summer for the regional tourism grants. Under the current grant system, certain elements from the trails would actually be eligible already. So there's no exclusionary process for some of our nonprofit trail organizations under the current regional tourism program. And that's the $25,000 grant program that we already administer. We just actually completed our last round about a week ago. So if we had one of the tourism grant, if they came through the tourism grant program and they said, we're doing this wonderful, amazing thing that's going to attract a bunch of visitors to the area, and they were looking for either event funding or attraction funding, it already actually is eligible. So moving them into that category is, I mean, it's not that we're moving them in, it's that in most cases they are actually already eligible. As we go through that review process, we're going to open it up similarly to the RIP. It's a different type of program, but we are going to try and review it a little bit more extensively this summer just to clarify the process. Similar to what we're doing here today, we want to make it easier to use, and we want to adapt it so that it's meeting all of our current needs. So I can't guarantee that we're going to augment it in any way because we're not that far along in the process, but I can say that we are giving serious consideration to making sure that it's an all-inclusive program that isn't lacking in our assets. As I had mentioned, one of the things that differentiates trails from most other RIP applications is the fact that they're actually eligible for numerous other funding programs that most other applicants aren't. So trail components, either through the conservation authorities or through the nonprofit organizations, are eligible for Trillium funding. They're eligible for hydro funding. They're eligible for accessibility funding and a wide variety of other federal and provincial programs that specifically do speak to recreation and land use. So that was one of the recommendations, given the pandemic conditions that have so heavily impacted business. The removal of the trails component, while it's recognized by all members as being an amazing attribute for our communities, it was felt that they were better funded in other programs, including our own other programs.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Williams. Okay, thank you. Deputy Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you. Through you, Warden. Councillor Williams had asked the same question that I was going to ask. And Tara, thank you very much for that explanation, because I did find it a little bit confusing, in particular with the fact that the conservation authorities wouldn't have qualified for the grant, yet maybe a township would, and it would have just contradicted itself and I think caused some confusion, but you clarified that, and thank you very much. I think this is a great program, and I'm really glad that we're doing this. And yeah, the trails seem to be the stickler right now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just two things. I'm not sure, maybe I'm just drilling down too hard on it and concerned, but on page 27-231, we speak, it speaks of parking lots or asphalting. And I'm just wondering if I may, to the CAO, is it necessary at all to consider the language in order to be, to quote it, in order to be eligible, such improvements must be included within a more comprehensive improvement plan or project? Above, I think in the first description, it talks about must be part of an application involving other property improvements. Is there any ambiguity whenever we go to reading the background? Maybe someone has a project that they're, renewing the facade of a building on their own, and or through a loan, a private loan, and they want to take on the parking lot. Is there any ambiguity that we have to deal with? And to my fellow members of council, this is somewhat what we go through during the process of evaluating these applications, is the ambiguity. And I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to clear that up.
Okay, thank you. Tim or Tara?
Yeah, I'll take, thank you, through Mr. Warden. Thank you for the question, Councillor Fraser. There was a lot of discussion, and there has been some since the get-go. I think, rather than ambiguity in this one, I think the language clarifies that. I think what it does, without getting overly specific, it gives the committee, the review committee, the ability to look at, like it says, applications where asphalting certainly forms a part of the application, but is not the main focus of the application. Like you said, it's a facade improvement or a renovation on a second floor or something like that. And the ancillary part of the application is I want to asphalt my lot, or I want to grade my lot, or I want to put a new entrance. So I think the wording, the way it is now, gives the committee the flexibility to consider that. I think what the language says is that if you're the only component of your application is I want to pave my parking lot, or I want to grade it or asphalt, and there's no other property improvements, I think what the language says is that you wouldn't be eligible under this program. So to me, it clears up the ambiguity around standalone parking lot improvements and things like that, but gives the committee the flexibility to still include those as part of a broader application. Because in my view, I think that a decent parking area, one that functions properly and is not full of bird baths, and certainly makes a business a lot more attractive for especially you don't want to walk through puddles and stuff like that. So it makes a business. It's part of that whole ambiance or whatever when you go to a business. So I hope, Councillor Fraser, that answers your question. Perhaps not, but
no, it's not my contention. I am supportive of that the whole envelope and the whole project being encompassed with all of that. It's just the background. Whenever the committee meets, Mr. CAO, I'm hoping that no one says, well, there is an ongoing project funded elsewhere, and because the background speaks of the background speaks of other project. That's all. That it's not about the parking lot itself. It's just about the ambiguity, because the term is captured, and then whenever you speak of the background, there, to me, sitting on the committee, there is a bit of a separation, but I do understand the intent, and I do support the intent. Thank you. One other comment, if we can go to the trails, if I look at if I can find the language. So one of the aspects to Councillor Smith and Councillor Williams, if you look at the removal of that section 1.3 parentheses 2, promote active tourism. For us, I can't speak for North Stormont and North Glengarry, but definitely for North Dundas, whenever part of the regional incentive plan program talks about, especially within the waterfront area, it does raise the hairs in the back of my neck whenever I think of that. And I'm glad that that we're going to be treated on a more level basis, because the waterfront area in North Dundas, and I'm guessing in North Glengarry, or I'm sorry, I shouldn't guess for on anyone else's behalf, but in North Dundas, for sure. There's not a whole lot of waterfront area, so that sort of sterilizes us somewhat. But I'm glad that the trails do have an outlet with the tourism grant possibility. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Okay, thank you. Back to Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I have two comments specifically related to the terms of reference. The makeup of the committee, I think the proposal is a good one. However, I'm just wondering about the two lay appointees will be appointed for a 2-year term. Now, this program is it's a complex program to both understand the content of it and how to deliver these dollars, and to put a lay person in a position where they have to get up to speed very quickly in order to understand and participate meaningfully. And it'll take them probably a year to do that, and then they've got another year, and then they're out. And then presumably new lay people come in. I'm thinking it might be sensible to have those lay members appointed for a 4-year term. So that is something I think council should consider. I'll make my other point at the same time. With regards to, I have a proposal that would bring, once the committee has approved the various applications, I think it would be a good idea for accountability and transparency purposes, given that this is taxpayers' dollars, $250,000 a year that are being allocated. That if those applications could then be presented by resolution to council. It really is more of a probably a housekeeping detail, and then have council vote on them. I think what it would do is it would give council members an opportunity to see those applications as they're coming through the committee. I wouldn't expect that any of them would get voted down or anything like that by council, but it does provide a layer of accountability and transparency. It allows council members to follow the process a little more closely, and it also would give the program some good press coverage as they are being approved, because it is such a successful program. So those are two things that perhaps we can take a minute or two to discuss. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will go to Councillor Gardner, but before that, is there any comments from Tara or Tim in regards to Councillor Williams? Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, just thank you, Mr. Warden, if I may. Yeah, the term, I think that you know, a lot of committee appointments are 2 years, so there was no particular. I think Councillor Williams makes a good point on that. You know, the getting up to speed, but the 2 year was just picked, you know, because to make it concurrent with some of the other appointments. But if council wants to make their lay appointments for the concurrent with the term of council, we can certainly make that change. And we've had 2 really good lay appointees. Hopefully they reapply, but they've done, I think, a great job working with the committee. On the second point, I think that again, that's up to council, but I think the rationale was council wanted to delegate the approval authority for these grant systems to the committee to depoliticize it, if you will. So I'm not sure whether Councillor Williams is suggesting that they come back to council for final approval, or whether they come back to council for information. I mean, I know what's been done. Twice a year, I believe. It depends on the intake, but certainly in the last few years, there's been a report, a comprehensive report's been brought forward to county council at least twice a year, talking about, you know, the applications that were approved and what's involved in it, the dollar amounts and where they are. But again, certainly it's up to council in terms of how they want this to move forward, if you want to make a substantive change on that.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, no, I don't think that process would politicize it at all. As a matter of fact, it would probably depoliticize it. It's really just a question of like I said, accountability and transparency. I don't see any debate happening. It's really more of a formality that would allow council members to be to be a little more involved in the process, and to actually be, you know, voting on applying those dollars. We do it in North Glengarry for our CIP, and it works very well. Jamie, I don't know whether you can speak to that or not.
Okay, I'll probably get back to that, Councillor Williams. I'm going to go to Councillor Gardner, then Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Warden Prevost. Just a couple of comments. I think that I don't agree with the flat out extension for 4 years for the appointments. I think maybe the wording could be with possibility of extension. So if it's worked well and the lay people would like to continue, then I think we could just maybe there could be some wording about there could be consideration for an automatic extension. I also, I see where Councillor Williams is coming from as far as transparency and bringing things forward. However, it's a lot of work on that committee. And I think that while this council works really well together, I think that there may be times where it would be politically contentious. And I think that if people have a right to vote, I think they could not vote to approve it. And I think that may do damage to the program in future years. Obviously, councils can change things, but I just, in my mind, it is a lot of work. It's a lot of review, and the committee does put a lot of time and effort into it. I know as someone who sat on that committee, you're looking at probably 4 or 5 hours to review all the applications, and then sit on the committee and have the discussion. So I think that I agree with the changes as presented, and I think that information only, as CAO Simpson has suggested, where it's a key information report or a presentation, I think is fine. But I think when you put this council in a position where we could vote one way or the other, I don't really like rubber stamping votes, so I take the vote seriously. So I'd be cautious with that. Just my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I'm going to have to agree with the terms of the lay appointments of 2 years. As long as the lay appointments are allowed to reapply immediately after for the next 2 years, I believe that a 4-year term might be asking a little bit too much for some of the lay appointments, as they might have other plans after, in year 3 or year 4. So we may not get as many applicants because of that reason. But if the lay appointments are allowed to reapply for the next 2 years as well, I see no reason why 2 years isn't what we should go for. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions or comments? Councillor Byfelds, then Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Warden. In speaking to Councillor Williams' concern, Councillor Gardner's rebuttal on bringing the information to council, this is a major program by counties, and I think having some public, display or justification as into why these dollars are going and where they're going is not a bad thing. I know part of the program, excuse me, was supposed to be a quarterly report. We either continue with a quarterly report, and I'm not afraid of, I think names should be applied. People should know where these dollars are funneling out to the within the counties, and that way they can see the results of the investment within the counties. And I think putting it in a key information report, whether it's within the consent agenda or as part of our regular agenda, be presented by our CAO or economic development officer, is not a bad thing for council. And it is our duty to question if necessary. All due respect to the committee, there is a lot of work to do in making sure that the dollars that we entrust them is spent properly. But it is also our onus that if someone on the street asks us where is this money going to and why is it going there, and we need to know the answers, and to deflect those answers off to the committee is not fair to them, and it's not fair to us. So I do believe we need to have that information come out, and if it comes out either way, and if it's in the consent agenda, any one of us can pull it out and question it. So at least that information is there for us in the public. Thank you.
Good comments. Thank you. Councillor Fraser, then Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. I support the lay appointment for 2 years with an opportunity to renew. I support that. The program is somewhat, I don't want to say complicated, but there is a lot involved in the program, and a lay appointee, I'm sure that they will endeavor to come up to speed so they're able to participate fully. As for the effort, there's lots of effort, lots of hours. I think Councillor Gardner was a little light on her timeline. I'm sure she spends more than 4 or 5 hours. She's thoroughly well versed in everything we discuss at the regional incentive program meetings, as all our members are. They're hard conversations, they're involved conversations, and there's lots of good questions asked. A lot of time is spent by all of the members of the committee, and to have it, not to say that we can't have it overturned, a decision made. You know, we are members of council, and everyone in council has a right to ask questions. But to take the large number of hours and the hard discussions amongst the committee members, and to just to look at it and say that have a vote from members of council at the last minute and overturn all the efforts would be disappointing to many members on the committee. The trust that's been placed in us as members of council, the trust has been placed in the lay members and in staff as members of the committee. I think we should look at that a little with serious concern. That trust has been placed, and rightfully so. I just wanted to touch base on those two things. I do believe I sort of got lost in my conversation, but it's the lay appointees I support, and to Councillor Byveld's thoughts. Yes, that information needs to go out. All members of council need to be able to express how the money was spent, and or to pass it along to members of the committee. They are fully aware of where the dollars went and how they went that way, and they're fully prepared to answer those questions. But all members of council do need, be it I do believe in the key information or in the consent agenda section, they need that information there. We don't want to be standing on the street corner not sure of what we speak. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Armstrong, and then I have a couple of comments. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Warden. As far as the appointees for the lay people, I believe that Councillor Williams Hart is in the right place. But correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Warden. Even for council members, should this have been a regular year, not the catastrophe that we find ourselves in? Even council members would not necessarily sit on committees for 4 years. So I'm not sure that we should have lay people sitting for 4 years, but and I do like the option of having them have the choice of at least applying for the second portion of a term, so they could go for 4 years if it seemed to be acceptable. I'm torn actually on the second recommendation that Councillor Williams has. We do much like she explained for North Glengarry. We do the same thing. We have our CIP, and we have a couple of other small committees that award recreation grants and certain things. But at the end of the day, the final decision is made by council. It generally, well, in my time, it's never happened that it's been refused, the recommendation. But I'm not a big fan of autonomy by committees, to tell you the truth. I do think that Councillor Byveld is correct. The onus is on us, as it is on us for every single portion of what goes on in our organization, to find and read reports and see if we have issues with them. I think I tend to come out on the side that the final say should be from the council, because I'm not big on having any committee be able to award tax dollars without it at least being brought in the form of a motion. What we do in North Dundas is, Committee A makes these recommendations to be passed by the Township of North Dundas, and we vote on it. And I do think, considering it's tax dollars, that she has a point. I'm not saying this as far as trying to nitpick through people's work. But to Councillor Byveld's point, that's sort of what we're doing anyway. We're picking through the work as we read the reports. If there's an issue at the final time, then I think it's prudent that it gets discussed without the money already being given. Because if we don't make sure of that, then it also can become embarrassing if we don't agree with what's been done. And then you're talking afterwards, right? So I don't think it should be huge discussion on any of them, and I think that we would trust and see quality work from all of our committees, but I do think that it should hit the table to be finally passed.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor McDonald.
Yes, just to jump onto what Councillor Armstrong has said, I too agree that it should come to the council table. It's not a question of trusting the committee. I think that we put our trust in the committee by appointing them to that committee. The Township of North Glengarry, we've had it come to us and we have never changed anything on it. And not to say that maybe in the future we wouldn't want to change something, but at least we have that opportunity. And putting again, just to jump on what he said at the end, Councillor Armstrong said at the end, I mean, this could be an embarrassment to us in the future that we don't have control over the spending of $250,000. So I think it's prudent that it comes. I'm doubtful that anybody will ever, will probably have some questions on what's happening, but I'm doubtful that any of us would ever probably go against the committee's recommendation. And I agree with the 2-year terms. People put their names in and they are well-intentioned, but some people just don't make the cut. And I think after 2 years, it's a good time to maybe go back out and see if there's somebody else. And if they've done a great job, then you'll gladly take them back. So that's my opinions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Just to move on, I'll get to you, Councillor Landry, in a second, but the 2-year term seems to be consistent across the floor in regards to allowing a 2-year term and then have the additional 2 years for the opportunity of coming back. There's mixed feelings, I guess, in regards to the committee making the decision or bringing it back to council. I kind of look at Councillor Fraser and Councillor Gardner's discussion in regards to the amount of hours that are taken in regards to looking at the applications. I'm not sure if all the members of County Council have that time to look at it, and I think we need, if it's going to come back to County Council to make a decision, then boy, we have to do our homework and make sure we go through every single application to make sure that we are making that final decision at the end of the day. I do have faith in regards to our committees that are out there, and I think if the committee looks at these applications and makes a decision on our behalf, I think we should trust them with that respect. And I don't have an issue with coming back as information purposes. I think every one of them is a good news story, and I think we need to know that, and I think our communities need to know where their dollars go. But I don't know if it's fair to bring every single application back to County Council. Like Councillor Fraser and Gardner said, there's many hours spent in the applications, and if we're going to make those decisions, then we have to look at every single application and go from there. I'll go to Councillor Landry, then Councillor Armstrong, then Councillor McDonald, and hopefully we can wrap it up.
Thank you, Warden Craigo. My question, I 2 years, I can see a renewal of the extra 2 years, which gives an out for both parties. So if we're not satisfied or they committed too much to what they were thinking of, it would give an out for both parties. My question, maybe Tim can answer, as far as the layperson, has the applications been, like, can I announce to our constituents that there is positions available that they can apply, or where are we at with that process?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have to ask Tara. I'm not sure, or really, if that is closed. I mean, it's certainly been advertised. I'm not sure if that either Kimberly or Tara, do you know if that is it closed yet?
It isn't. So they have until this coming Friday to apply for the positions. As of today, we only have 2 applicants who have come forward. So please do spread the word. We have been advertising the lay appointment committees. We've been putting it on social media as well as in traditional print ads. All of that information was sent to the municipalities through the EDOs, and I believe also to the clerks. We can forward that information again if you want to have access to it. Also make sure it goes to all county councillors. And yeah, please do spread the word. We're going to be bringing it back to the next committee, the next council meeting, so that you can hopefully make the decision on those lay appointees. And as has been noted in this meeting, the lay appointments for this process will also include the county councillors who sit on that committee. So we're going to be going through the process to appoint the new lay members, but also the new county council members.
Thanks, Tara. If it's been submitted to CAO, it's just we have our municipal council tomorrow night, and I just wondered if I could just make the announcement. But as of it's from here to Friday is the deadline for the applications. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tara. Is there 6 that sit on the committee? Is that what the number is? 4, 5? So 3 and 2. Okay, thank you. Councillor Armstrong, then Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just to clarify, and I think the language sort of turns to, there's a lot of work to be done by the committee. There absolutely is. There's a lot of work, I assume, for all of our committees. I only sit on one, but I know what it takes, and you gentlemen are much more accustomed to it than I am, but I know what it takes for the Shared Services Committee, for instance. However, at the end of the day, it is still governed by a group of 12 of us, not by a group of 4 or 6 or 5. This is where a bit of my issue comes through, and it shouldn't be taken with hard feelings or as an insult or as any sort of watchdog thing. It's just simply the organization to which we are part of. But just to clarify how it works in North Dundas, so that it doesn't seem like I'm recommending something that I'm not. When we get, for instance, our CIP recommendations to be looked at by council, we don't get all of the applications afterwards. Those you can find on your own. We get the ones that are recommended, and we decide on whether or not they fall within, we believe as a council as a whole, they fall within the parameters of what they should fall in, and those are the only ones that they discuss. And I'm not suggesting that we would be sitting there at county council table, and I don't think that we should, and that language should be in it for that manner, where I would be saying, well, why is the application in Alexandria being passed, but not the one in Winchester that isn't even showing up here? It would only be to discuss and see the findings of the committee, and council could pass or not pass or have questions at that point in time in the open council to show all of our taxpayers that we are behaving in the proper manner openly, where everyone could have a say on the decisions made by the committee, not questioning the decisions as far as why was this one left out and this one's in, just simply on the findings of the committee. And I think that every committee, that be it a mixed committee or even a committee of council, should always expect that scrutiny at the public table. That's just my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Just for expediency, I echo exactly what Councillor Armstrong just said.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go back. The 2-year term seems to be consistent across the board, and allowing them to apply either way for the approval by county council. The question is, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. Is council asking that the applications come back to the council table for a vote in regards to being either in favor of them or opposing them? So if I can have a show of hands that people are looking for that to come back to county council before a decision is finally made. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me look at it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and opposed to that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Councillor Prevost, I think you missed Councillor Gardner, who voted
Yes.
in favor, I believe, on the first term.
Okay,
So,
I'll go back. I'll ask again then, who's in favor of coming back to county council? If you could just hold your hands up until I'm finished. So we have 1. So Councillor Fraser, you're in favor of coming back to county council?
Well, yes, thank you. And I don't want to prolong this. I am in favor of it coming back to council. I am in favor of the full council understanding, as Councillor Armstrong has stated, this is the way we do it in North Dundas. I am in favor of that. The original question seemed to be more of a discussion when it came from Councillor Williams, and this is not what I'm in favor of. I'm in favor of council recognizing what's taken place, council agreeing to what was not so much agreeing, having the opportunity to agree or disagree with what took place. As for coming back to council for a full discussion on all matters in the process after the decision has been made, that is what I contend I don't support. But as coming back to council, I do support it coming back to council. Sorry, Councillor Gardner.
Yeah, sorry, Warden. That's what I'm voting on. I agree with it coming back to be approved. I'm not agreeing on the original to have an open discussion kind of thing.
And that's all I'm suggesting, Mr. Warden.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Mr. Warden, that was never my suggestion to start with. It was exactly as Councillor Armstrong has stated. It was never an intention that we would debate those applications. That would not be practical, nor would it be fair. It's simply a question of accountability and transparency, which is where this all started. I don't know where that misunderstanding came from, but that was never my intention.
Okay, thank you. Before we go back to a vote, I'll ask Tim or Tara, should we postpone this until another meeting just to come back with some further?
Well,
ahead,
yeah, if I might, Mr. Warden, what I think I'm hearing is that what the decisions that would be made by the Regional Incentives Review Committee would be subject to final ratification from County Council, and then we could bring forward a report subsequent to the meeting to that group that lists, you know, here's the applicants, here's the decisions, and here's the dollar amounts, and that document would be ratified by County Council. So I think everybody's waiting on this program. So if I might suggest, if council's comfortable with that approach, what we will do as staff, we will amend the, I'm hearing council's okay with the 2 years for the appointment. What we'll do is we'll amend the terms of reference to include a clause in there that says that final ratification of county council is required, and that should be done as quickly as possible after the Regional Incentives Program Review Committee meets. Council meets once a month, and then they will go forward to county council. As I said earlier, they're always brought forward, not for ratification, but for information purposes. But we can bring it forward immediately after the committee meeting. Make sure council's okay with the awards that are made, and once county council gives their seal of approval, then we would go from there. So if that's the will of council, I think we can make the amendments and then bring it forward to council before the end of the meeting, if you're okay with that, and get the document approved.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to hold off on this motion until you bring back the amendments. Is that what you're?
If council's okay with that,
I'm going to be fine with that, Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, that's fine. Just for and I do understand what it is that you're saying, Tim, but just for to be concise, simply bring back to the committee. Simply needs to bring back to council the recommendations going forward as to who should be awarded and the dollar figure, and then let council decide to ratify that, and that's it. We don't need to see any other applications. We don't need to see you don't need to show your work on a 2-page sheet. Just provide the information, and then council will go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to come back whenever they're ready in regards to the amendments in respect to that motion. So we'll move on from this issue, and we'll go into the second one, which is the Habitat for Humanity donation request. Madam Clerk.
I have a motion. It's moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Landry, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry approve a donation in the amount of $1,000 to Habitat for Humanity, Cornwall and the Counties, to be funded from the 2021 Council donations budget.
Okay, did you have anything you want to speak on that, Mrs. Catherine?
Sure, through you, Mr. Warden, I can give a quick overview. At our last county council meeting, you're all aware that we had a really informative presentation by Habitat for Humanity. At that meeting, they did request either a monetary donation or a parcel of land from the county. At this time, there is no suitable parcel of land to donate to the organization, but council, if they choose, could donate $1,000 from that miscellaneous budget within their council donations budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or concerns, comments? Not seeing none. All in favor of the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll move to financial services, the capital asset policy action request. Madam Clerk.
We have a motion moved by Councillor Warden, seconded by Councillor Byvelds, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry approve revisions to the tangible capital assets policy number 1-18.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca.
Good morning, Council. So the county has been accounting for tangible capital.
We can't hear you, Rebecca.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but very, very little. It's like your volume is way down or something.
Well, if I talk louder, is that okay? You can hear me?
That's right there, yep.
All right. Jeepers, I tested it with Mike again this morning, hoping this wouldn't happen, but all right. So
no,
I will.
You're cutting in and out, actually, unfortunately.
Okay. Perhaps I should be logging out and logging back in. If everybody is having a problem hearing me, I think maybe I.
No, can't hear you.
Okay. Okay, what about now? Can you hear me now?
Try it again.
Can you hear me now?
Somewhat.
Oh, gosh.
Right there.
Okay.
We can right there. Yep.
Okay, I won't move. Okay. So the county has been accounting for tangible capital assets since 2009, and we implemented the TCA policy at that time. A few years ago, we made some minor revisions to the policy where we increased the thresholds of some of the asset classes. However, I am proposing a further minor revision to the existing TCA policy in which an increase of
You're cutting out again.
Okay. If council will allow me, I'm going to log out and log back in if that's all right.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Warden, can we just move on till we come back to it, or?
Yeah, I was going to recommend that we move to the service delivery review and then we'll come back to Rebecca. But I guess she's doing the second one too.
We can move on if Ben's ready.
Okay, so we'll move into transportation. We'll do the 3 in transportation, then we'll come back to setback for the 4145 County Road 14.
Kimberly?
Yeah, do you have a motion for that, Madam Clerk?
Yes, sorry, moved by Councillor McGillis, seconded by Councillor Smith, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry approve a setback of up to 25.72 meters from the center line of SDG County Road 14 for civic number 4145 to facilitate the construction of a detached accessory building, including coach house, and authorize the Director of Transportation and Planning to issue a setback permit to recognize the same.
Thank you. Mr. Don.
Thank you. Very briefly, we have received a request for a setback permit at 4145 County Road 14. The details about how we arrived at this point are provided in Council's report, but essentially the issue lies that the applicant and there is some discrepancy between the actual setback of the existing building and what we tied the permit to and versus what was poured on site with the footings. Ultimately, when you look at the site itself, if you kind of back up a couple steps and look at the site itself, what's being requested, and the desire to, you can see in the picture that I'm sharing my screen of, save some trees, avoid some conflicts between the proposed building and some of the structures to the back. It's a reasonably straightforward request from staff's perspective. It's there's no harm done to the county or no. There's nothing that's affected by the setback that's requested closer than the existing building. So with that, I guess we'll leave it to council to ask any questions that there may be.
Sorry, thank you. Is there any questions or comments from members of council? Not seeing none. You heard the motion. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you. The next one is the setback municipality of South Dundas, Dutch Meadows Pumping Station.
It's moved by Councillor Bivell, seconded by Councillor Gardner, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry approve a setback of up to 23 meters from the center line of SDG County Road 2 to facilitate the construction of a pumping station which will service the Dutch Meadows subdivision in Morseburg, and authorize the Director of Transportation and Planning Services to issue a setback permit to recognize the same, and that Council authorize the Director to waive all fees associated with issuing this permit.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Don.
Thank you. I wanted to say no to this one, but I guess we'll help out South Dundas. I'm just kidding. No, this is for South Dundas. It's critical municipal infrastructure, relatively straightforward. Again, it's helping to facilitate the work out at Dutch Meadows, and we're happy to work with the municipality to get this approved and get them constructing.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Not seeing none. You heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. And the last one with the support of County Road 34, Alexandria.
It's moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Williams, that the Council of the United Counties of SDG approve the municipal class environmental assessment for the County Road 34 Alexandria Main Street project, and that County Council authorize staff to post the notice of completion for the required public review period.
Thank you. Mr. Don.
Thank you. Very quickly, I do want to point out a couple things with this report. We spoke very in great detail at our last meeting about the EA in Alexandria, and really this is what we'd call the rubber stamp of it. After which it gets posted on our website, and then it goes through the period of public review, and then is finalized, which gives the county the permission to proceed to do the work at some point in the future. In terms of feedback we received from members of the public, we did have some commentary with respect to the concerns with the future truck bypass, which would go north of County Road 45 and swing towards County Road 34. I know, recognizing that that's kind of greenfield construction and something that's way far out into the future. So we've actually had an opportunity to speak with many of the residents there, just to reassure them that that whole project itself has to go through an EA altogether. So it's not something that's happening and not something that's technically being approved as part of this EA. Really what that says is this is what we're looking to the future, and it's something we need to study. So that's really all this EA is doing or approving right now. We like I said, we spoke with many of those residents, and we made some changes in the report as well as some of the mapping, just to kind of, I guess, make it a little less distinct, our path that we had put in the report, and show that, you know, this is kind of conceptual what we're trying to do. The other thing I want to note is that I did include a draft commercial vehicle restriction bylaw in the action request. It's something I'll bring back to council in May. It does contemplate a seasonal load restriction, and I guess what I wanted to do with that is just give council the opportunity to see what would come back in May, and ask if there's any questions or concerns with respect to that seasonal load restriction. It is something that is contemplated in the EA itself. So it is, I think, you know, from where I sit, it's part of where we want to go. So with that, I guess, oh, and just for context, it is restricting vehicular commercial through traffic on County Road 34 between June 1st and November 1st. So if we bring it back to council at our next meeting, we can have it in place by June, and then it would stay in place until November.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Don. Is there any comments or questions from members of council? Councillor Williams, then Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Ben, I just want to thank you for contemplating this load, the restriction on the bypass through Alexandria. That's exactly what the public has been calling for many years, and I think it's a great first step in terms of assessing whether or not, first of all, that works, and then assuming that it does and that it's successful, then continue work on the bypass in order to make it a year-round bypass, which I think would settle the question of heavy truck traffic on through Alexandria for good. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And while I'm not necessarily opposed to truck restrictions, there's something inherently inside me that does want to give a word of caution. If it is imposed, it's something that, Mr. Don, I know you're aware, but I will just make sure that I say it in public, that communication will be the key. And if you're given the propensity of businesses throughout places north and south of Alexandria, they tend to be somewhat agricultural and somewhat building related. So the loads by nature are heavy. And although everybody hates trucks, if you don't have them, then we'd be in worse condition than we're in right now. So as long as it's not, I guess, speaking from the trucking side, it's not something that's necessarily pushed back on from the trucking industry, but we certainly enjoy having good conversation and good communication, as opposed to just putting MTO people out and finding the people that are getting all of the things that the people that don't want the trucks around, but they want to own those items. So it's or, you know, and again, in an agricultural area north and south of that, they have to be able to have a clear view to get feed and product and stock and everything else that they need as well. So it's always nice to say, well, we don't want trucks around here, but if you build a nice bypass, then they, as well as the commuters, can go up and down Alexandria anytime they want. The trucks have been screaming for a long time have a better way of getting through that area. So, you know, it's a dual-edged sword if you finally provide a way to get around Alexandria, and yet then cut down what it is that we're allowed to carry. So please just, you know, have a gentle hand, Mr. Don, you know, when you're going to go down that route.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of council? Not seeing none. You heard the motion that's on the table. All in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Don. We'll go back to financial services. I'll just check with Mrs. Russell to see how her microphone is.
My apologies, council. I hope you can hear me now.
We can, but before Mrs. Russell, I'll go back to Mrs. Castleman to read the motion one more time, please.
Excellent. Thanks.
It's moved by Councillor Worden, seconded by Councillor Bivalds, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry approve revisions to the Tangible Capital Assets Policy number 1-18.
Thank you. Back to you, Mrs. Russell.
Okay. So the county has been accounting for tangible capital assets since 2009, and we implemented the TCA policy at that time. A few years ago, we made some minor revisions to the policy where we increased the thresholds of some of the asset classes. However, I am proposing a further minor revision to the existing TCA policy in which an increase in the capital asset threshold is recommended to start at $50,000 for all asset classes. I have reviewed this change with our auditor at MNP, who confirmed a $50,000 threshold is a reasonable recommendation. This change would result in any asset purchases under $50,000 be expensed in the year the purchase was made, and anything over that cost would be depreciated over the asset's useful life. We will continue to monitor and record expenses below the threshold and link this data to the asset records where feasible through our asset management software. This will assist us in determining the future operating expenses linked to our assets, which is in line with the future of our asset management plan. Any question?
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from members of council? Not seeing none. You heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you, Rebecca. And number 2 is the service delivery review action request.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Wirtz, seconded by Councillor Gardner, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry authorize KPMG LLP to complete the service delivery review for the Financial Services Department for the price of $35,000 plus HST, and that COVID-19 funding be used to offset the cost of the review, and that the Director of Financial Services be authorized to sign all necessary documents to give effect to the contract.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Russell.
Okay, so as part of the 2021 budget process, Council approved $20,000 to be spent from the modernization funding to conduct a service delivery review for financial services. The department contains 2 divisions, which is court services and financial services. The RFP came back with 1 submission from KPMG at a bid of $35,000. I would like to recommend that we award the RFP, but instead of using modernization funding to cover the cost of the review, I would like to propose that we use COVID funding, as this project is very much related to the changes that the pandemic has forced on us. The purpose of the review is to find ways to modernize services while finding efficiencies and cost savings. Now more than ever, the department has changed so dramatically, and COVID has had a significant impact on not only our services to both internal and external customers, but for court services specifically, expenses are always steady, and revenues have been decreasing at a rapid pace over the last few years. Starting last year was quite a significant loss. A question was posed to me recently asking if court services could cost the county money in the future. Currently, the net revenues from court are used to offset the overall annual budget. However, there is a likelihood in the future that this won't be the case and that our tax levy will be required to balance this budget. I would like to have the service delivery review completed to hopefully find a means to address the concerns that I have and to plan for the future of the department.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Not seeing none. All in favor of the motion? The motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Russell. So we'll move to tender and quotations, 3/4 ton trucks, action requests. Madam Clerk.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Worden, seconded by Councillor Wirt, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry accept the tender from Surgeoner Chevrolet Buick GMC Cadillac for 2 3/4 ton trucks at the total price of $82,630 plus HST, and that the Director of Transportation and Planning Services be authorized to sign all necessary documents to give effect to the contract.
Thank you. Mr. Don?
Sorry, Mr. Warden, I'll actually be speaking on this
Sorry,
report.
Mr. Baker. Go ahead.
So good morning, Council. First tender before you this morning is for the purchase of 2 3/4-ton pickup trucks. These are identified in our vehicle replacement schedule, which is the guide for our fleet management, just to make sure everything is fresh and reliable. As you'll see, there are 3 bids received, all very competitive pricing, but with the low bid being from Surgeon or Chev. Although the purchase is $600 over budget, it's still a very good price for this equipment, and we are recommending award. I believe it's a pretty straightforward report, but be glad to answer any questions anyone would have.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Any comments or questions? Not seeing none. All in favor of the motion? The motion's carried. Thank you. And B is the loader for Finch. Madam Clerk.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor Laundrie, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry accept the tender from J.R. Bryson Equipment Limited for the purchase of 1 loader at the tendered price of $241,487 plus HST, and that Council authorize the disposal of SDG's 2000 Case 621C loader to offset the purchase price, either by accepting the dealer's proposed trade-in valuation of $20,000 or by auction, whichever is determined to provide the best overall value to the corporation, and that the Director of Transportation and Planning be authorized to sign all necessary documents to give effect to the contract.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Baker.
All right, so this tender is also for replacement of a scheduled piece per our fleet management. Obviously a very integral piece of our winter maintenance operations. The loader is also used as a power plant for our shoulder spreader machine that we bought a couple of years ago. So it is used year round, but obviously much more heavily in the winter time. 2 bids received on budget pricing. I guess what's a little different about the structure of this tender is the way in which we will plan on disposing of the surplus loader, which we currently own. With the purchase of this new one, obviously we can get rid of the existing loader. This is the same format we used in 2018, and it worked very well for us. So what we do is get a kind of a guaranteed trade-in price from the dealer, and then use our online auction service to see if we can potentially get some more money for it, knowing that they're going to be reselling it. So if we can, direct sell to the end user, potential that we make off a little bit better on this tender. Again, straightforward purchase, but pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Warden.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden. Trevor, I just wanted to thank you for disposing of the asset in that manner. I think it's great thinking. If we can get more than the 20,000, I think it's really good. So I appreciated that when I read that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing none. You heard the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. And C is the storm sewer flushing and camera inspections action request.
It's moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Gardner, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry accept the tender from Aqua Drain Sewer Services, Inc. for the storm sewer and flushing and camera inspections at their unit prices totaling $75,557.65 plus HST, and that the Director of Transportation and Planning Services be authorized to sign all necessary documents to give effect to the contract.
Thank you. Mr. Jans, are you speaking on this one?
Yes, I will. Can you hear me?
Somewhat, yeah. Go ahead.
So these investigations are to provide us with the information necessary to comply with Ontario Regulation 588-17, which is the asset management planning for municipal infrastructure regulation. This regulation requires us to submit an asset management plan now due July 1st, 2022. And storm sewers, being one of our core assets, must be included in this plan. We know of our assets, the condition of them needs to be determined, and this is how we propose to go about doing it. This work will have our storm sewers in North Dundas, South Dundas, and North Stormont covered by this investigation, and the remaining 3 municipalities would be done at the next
scope the next time. Welcome any questions at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Jans. Any comments or questions from members of council? Not seeing none. You heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you, Mr. Jans. And we'll move to microservicing action request.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Gardner, seconded by Councillor Bivalds, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry accept the joint tender from Miller Paving for microsurfacing at their unit prices totaling $751,802 plus HST. The joint tender includes the following: United Counties of SDG, $433,088, Municipality of South Dundas, $318,714, and that the Director of Transportation and Planning Services be authorized to sign all necessary documents to give effect to the contract.
Thank you. Mr. Jans, are you taking this one?
I will as well, yes.
Thank you.
As you will recall, we previously submitted an action request for a tender which included the additional scope of work of the patrol yards for the counties, which we determined was not within our budget. So this revised tender is limited only to the county roads and the Municipality of South Dundas roads, which is now within budget.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I being interrupted here. Please carry on without me.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Byfelds.
Thank you, Warden. And it's okay for Mike to have left. These questions are directed at Ben. Ben, looking at the scope of work that you told counties about at budget time, which included 41, which is still on, 31 north of 13, but now we're down to 3, and 31 north of Williamsburg. And at that time, there was some assumption 31 north of Williamsburg would go a little bit farther than the 2 kilometers that are on the list right now. Why the changes, especially since SDG 18 was never included in part of that budget discussion? And 31, and I will mention too, that 31 north of Williamsburg, the stretch was all paved one time right to Winchester Springs. And being very familiar with the road, I would say it's in excellent condition, but microservicing is, as I've told council and you before, is an excellent asset management plan that I fully agree with. It just, why are we doing things a little different?
Fair enough. And Mike, if you want to jump in if I miss something here, I know that we obviously with reducing the amount of work in there, we always get concerned that we're going to see higher prices. Of course, the more you have, the better the price you get. So and I'm not going to pretend I know exactly, and I can, if we need to defer this and come back to council again, I'd be happy to provide that if you need more information. But knowing our staff and knowing kind of how we approach these kinds of projects and tendering, we wanted to make sure that we came in on budget for council, and we had a sense of what our unit rates were, which were in line with what we were expecting at the time. But my estimation is that we were attempting to try and make sure we were covering ourselves. Now, with respect to County Road 18, that's a section of roadway that we were intending to, had been part of a reconstruction effort many years ago. We found contamination in the soil there, and we still have to, we have to return back to it, and that's one of those now need discussions we want to have with council. So I know we included that just for the sole reason that it's in pretty rough shape right now. That'll hold that roadway for a year or two while we work through our now needs. Actually, more than a year or two, but it'll extend the service life of that roadway and give us a little bit of a better road. So I know that's why staff had recommended let's get that in there right now, because it is becoming a maintenance demand from a pothole and patching perspective. But Mike, is there anything I'm missing on that, or why we would have revised the areas that we were originally discussing with council?
No, you had it with the unit rates and trying to cover ourselves.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Byfelds.
Thank you, Warden. Well, fair enough on the 18 discussion. It's something that, you don't know till you know. However, why the switch on 31? I understand that the traffic count from 31, from 343 north is significantly higher, but that road is significantly newer than the stretch from 31 from 18 to 5 in Winchester Springs. And my unprofessional opinion, I don't see a lot of sense in doing 2 kilometers on that stretch of road, which is no different from the rest of the 7 kilometers going to Winchester Springs. So why the switcheroo? And you can say you can defer to staff, but fair enough. But then let's show us the reasons, because you say one thing and then we're doing something totally different. And I know I'm being very fussy because I know that road very well, and no complaints of the road. I think 31 is that stretch is in excellent shape. And as I said, microservicing is good, but to do 2 kilometers, I'm just not seeing the logic in all that.
That's fair, and I just don't have the answer for council, and I apologize. I don't have the answer with me in front of me right now, and I would need to come back with some more information for council if that's something that council wants the details on.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Byfeld, just a question. Are you asking this to be deferred to the next meeting, or you want any amendment coming back at a later date?
No, Mr. Warden, I don't really want to stop it. I think things got to be done. I'm somewhat disappointed with the answer because, if we as council have to decide on approving things, and we do rely on staff, if we ask a question like that, that answer should be there, somewhat available. So, as I said, in my unprofessional opinion, I have a challenge just slapping 2 kilometers down and saying we're done, and then all of a sudden somebody's going to say, well, what's wrong with the rest? Like, you quit. I like consistency in road plans. It's just like if you do, pardon my word, a half a job of doing things. Now you're literally getting into that. Well, I got an extra 25 grand. Let's just apply it on here instead of saving the 25 and doing it right all at once.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Don. We will move ahead with the motion, but can you bring more information maybe back in regards to the changes at the council?
That's exactly what I was going to suggest is, this only starts us signing contracts. The reality is by the time we get to our May meeting, we will not have started any of that any of that work. And I'd be happy to provide the information to council and some options if there's some desire, because once we have a contract signed, we have unit rates. This kind of stuff, the unit rates are relatively comparable site to site. So if there's a concern that we shouldn't or shouldn't be doing that areas, I can provide some options to council as well if that's a desire, and we can just work through a contractual change order, which ultimately I don't to address those concerns if ultimately council does want to see a shift in terms of what our work is there.
Okay, thank you. So if that information can go back to the next meeting, would be appreciated. Councillor McGillis.
Well, thank you, Mr. Warden. Ben, I was thinking that short piece of road that you're going to be overlaying is because maybe you had some other work to do in that particular area in terms of ditching or any reconstruction part. Was that part of the issue why we're just doing the 2 kilometers there?
Again, I'd have to investigate with staff. I apologize. I just don't have the detail, the exact detail. And Mike, if you know of a little bit more than I do, by all means, feel free to jump in here.
No, I'm sorry. I don't have more information on this at this time.
Okay, we're going to move I'm going to ask for a vote on the motion, and I'll ask Mr. DeHaan and Mr. Jans to bring more information back at our next meeting. So the motion is on the table. All in favor of the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move to E as a corrugated steel pipes action request.
It's moved by Councillor Warden, seconded by Councillor Smith, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry accept the joint tender from Atlantic Industries Limited for corrugated steel pipe at their unit price totaling $110,209.06 plus HST. The joint tender includes the following: United Counties of SDG, $60,494.73, City of Cornwall, $9,062.18, South Stormont, $27,342.85, and South Glengarry, $13,309.30. And that the Director of Transportation and Planning Services be authorized to sign all necessary documents to give effect to the contract.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Baker or Mr.
Yes. Yep. Hello again. Yeah. So this tender is for the supply of some materials used by our in-house forces routinely for any entrance culvert replacements when we're ditching, or any cross culvert, road crossing culverts that we do in-house. As in the motion, included on this tender are the City of Cornwall, Township of South Stormont, and Township of South Glengarry. And really those values referenced in the motion are for our initial order for restocking common sizes or replacing any stocked items. But this tender does guarantee us firm pricing until the end of this calendar year for any potential reorders required. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Not seeing none. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll move to F as the McPhee Bridge action request.
It's moved by Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor McDonald, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry accept the tender from Dalcon Constructors Limited for the comprehensive rehabilitation of the McPhee Bridge at their unit prices totaling $1,163,000 plus HST, and that the Director of Transportation and Planning be authorized to sign all documents to give effect to the contract.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jans.
Thank you. So this is a bridge on County Road 10 east of Alexandria. It was constructed in 1965. It was last rehabilitated in 1985 with some light work then. It's in need of rehabilitation now to keep it in good working order. So this work will include concrete works, repair of the steel girders, waterproofing, new guide rails, etc. And we expect that this will buy another 30 years of service life out of this bridge. I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? Not seeing none. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you. And the final one is the Boundary Road Bridge repairs action request.
It's moved by Councillor Worden, seconded by Councillor Fraser, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry accept the tender from DW Building Restoration Services, Inc. for the repair of the Boundary Road Bridge at their unit prices totaling $134,386.50 plus HST, and that the Director of Transportation and Planning Services is authorized to sign all necessary documents to give effect to the contract.
Thank you. Mr. Jens.
Thank you. So this is a bridge that was constructed in 1978. It's on basically the limit between Boundary Road and County Road 19. We co-own this structure with the City of Cornwall, and it is due for its first rehabilitation. Unfortunately, the design of the bridge does not comply with the Canadian Bridge Design Code, and there are some hidden elements within the bridge that are cause for concern. So what we've come up with is a holding strategy. The proposed work will reinforce the bridge with new materials that we can be confident in, and provide us time to budget and plan for a replacement structure at this location.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Not seeing none. All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jens. My understanding is our amendments are prepared and ready for the regional incentive programs. So Mrs. Castleman, if you have that revised motion, go ahead, please.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Worden. It's moved by Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor Gardner, that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry approve the amendments to the Regional Incentive Program Policy Document, March 2021, as amended, and the terms of reference for the Regional Incentive Program Approval Committee as amended.
Okay, Mr. Simpson.
Great, thanks, Mr. Worden. What I'll do is I'll share my screen with council, if that's okay, and I'll just go through the changes to the document that I made. Hopefully they're in line with what council's wishes are, and then we can move forward. So just give me a sec. Okay, can everybody see that?
No.
No? Okay. Just a sec here. Can we see that now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so these this is the 2-page terms of reference document. So what I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll just touch on the sections that I've changed. So under section 1, which is mandate authority, I'll just read that verbatim. The mandate of the Regional Incentives Program Approvals Committee is to effectively and efficiently administer all aspects of the Regional Incentives Program of the county. The program, as described in the approved program document, as well as the companion materials, i.e. program guide, application form, financial agreements, etc. In recommending grant amounts to County Council, the Regional Incentives Program Approvals Committee shall adhere to all established guidelines and use prescribed tools. Annual financial allocations to the program shall be as determined by County Council. The second paragraph, I'm going to read that as well because it's been changed. Regional Incentives Approvals Committee shall be responsible for recommending the approval of regional tourism grants to County Council. That should actually say, I'm going to change that. That should say regional incentives grants to County Council. Final approval for all grants shall rest with County Council, who shall receive a summary report of all recommended grants as soon as reasonably possible after each committee meeting. Subsequent to council approval, the Regional Incentives Approvals Committee shall advise applicants of the success of their applications. I'm going to go to page 2. This is under, we had that discussion about the term of the lay appointees. First bullet's not changed. There's 3 members of council appointed for a 2-year term, one of whom shall be the warden or warden's designate, and 1 other member of County Council who shall act as chair. I've changed the second bullet to read 2 lay members appointed by County Council for a 2-year term concurrent with other council appointments. And I've added the section, lay appointees may be reappointed for a further 2-year term. So I've added that. So there's a possibility for reappointment. And I've made it clear that after review by the committee, as soon as that's done, we'll send a report to County Council with a list of the grant amounts, who's receiving the grants for approval at the next available County Council meeting, and then the committee will take it from there. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, or hopefully that's in accordance with Council's wishes.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. If we can go back to a full screen, thank you. I'll open it up if there's any comments or questions. Councilor Gardner.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with the transparency in this. I'm just wondering, should there be a provision just in case County Council said no?
Tara or Mr. Simpson, anybody want to take that one?
Well, if I might, Mr. Warden, through you, I would think that they are provisional. The way I heard it, the way I wrote it, was they'd be provisional approvals, such that the committee would do their review, and then applicants would not be advised whether or not their application has been finally approved until such time as that report went to County Council. And at that point, County Council would make their decisions. And then applicants would be advised. So if it went to the council table, County Council said no to 1 or more of the recommendations, then that application's not approved.
Councilor Gardner.
Okay. Yeah, because when we voted last time, I totally agree in the transparency, and I agree with my colleagues that it's a large sum of money, and obviously at the end of the day, this council is responsible for that. So I totally understand that. I'm just I'm not saying that we would say no. Obviously, there's been fulsome discussion about the level of respect for the committee and all this fun stuff, or any committee, right? The amount of time they spend working on these things. I'm just wondering if I guess it would just automatically go. I don't see any problems, but if the final thing rests with the council, then if it doesn't, and it goes back, it can go back to the committee, but what does the committee do with it? They've already given their recommendation. So I just, I'm not to try and make this more difficult, just if we're going to revise it, I'm just thinking that there should be a next step in there, because if it's the committee's recommendation, then
I'm at a lot. I don't know how to respond to that. I think either the council's the final approval authority, or the, I don't know how we could word it such that the region, you know, I think it's one or the other. So I'm open to suggestions on how we could change that.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Armstrong, then Councillor McDonald.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Warden, and I mean, with no disrespect to the severity of this matter, I think it's quite simple. The county council is the final authority to approve or disapprove the money, and if the county council were, for some reason, to say no to the recommendation, then that's where it dies. There's no need to go back to the committee. There's no need to go back to anywhere. There's no need for the proponent to have heard that they have a possibility of going through. I mean, it's done at our public table, and then it's done. Yes or no? That's it. The answer would be to, you know, you would simply, the committee would be writing to Armstrong Incorporated and saying, it's unfortunately at this time you were unsuccessful. Period.
I agree. Thank you, Councillor McDonald, and then Councillor McGillis.
Just same thing. I don't think it's any different than the library board a few years ago looking for security personnel or that kind of thing, and we said at county council no, and then it goes back to the library board to look at other alternatives. It's no different from any other committee. If council says no, you go back to the committee, and the committee either looks at that request again, but yeah, county council has to be, at the end of the day, we have to be the final say because it's taxpayer money.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McGillis and Councillor Smith.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Warden. I agree with Councillor McDonald. The recommendation should be going back to the committee for, you know, so somebody came in close to, maybe possibly to the ones that we denied. So I can't see that happening anyway, but because I'm pretty sure that the committee that's going to be formed is going to be well qualified to make the proper decisions. And I would agree with Councillor McDonald in that that goes back to the committee for another recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McGillis, or sorry, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I'm assuming that we're going to use up the full amount of the money with the applicants that we're going to have. I don't see any reason why we're going to be short of applications. However, if county council decides that one of the applicants doesn't really qualify and that we should disqualify them from that application, should we have our committee have a subsequent applicant or a standby applicant to fill that void, or are we going to just fall short of the full $250,000? Thanks.
Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through yet no, there's always in my experience with the committee, there's always a very many applications. So I would think in the event that county council refused one and there was money left on the table, it would be no problem for the committee to circle back with another application and bring that one forward. So there's no money left on the table, in my experience.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. So I guess what I was getting at is will there be a standby applicant where we can make a decision on that day rather than wait for another month for a council meeting? Because I'm sure these applicants will be in a hurry to get the grant money and move on or move forward with their projects rather than wait that extra month or maybe a little longer before they know they have that money to spend.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson.
Yeah, I would say I think we should leave the exact process up to the committee in terms of how they want to handle that scenario. They've, in my view, since 2018, they've done a very good job of you know, Councillor Fraser and Councillor Gardner have spoken about how the committee works. I think they've done a very good job of you know, responsibly managing the program. So I would think, you know, based on the new terms of reference, they'll put in place something that's going to work well for the applicants. Obviously the whole, there's no point in having the program if you can't get the money out the door. So that's, based on quality applicants. There's a lot of quality applicants, and there's some that they're so. So rather than answer that directly, I think the best way to answer that question, Councillor Smith, is to say just leave it up to the committee, and they'll figure out how to get the money out the door.
Okay, I'll move to Councillor Williams, and we'll go to a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I think the likelihood of any of these applications being voted down at the council level is very, very slim. The program is very well designed. Eligibility criteria is very clear. The applications tend to be of high quality, and the competition is very great. And usually the ones that float to the top, that are the best applications, there's little question that they should be funded. So I don't see this. I think, we're looking for problems where there probably aren't. I see this as a good move in terms of increasing accountability and transparency at the county council level. I think the public will appreciate it, and the applicants will appreciate it, and it's a good move for this program.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask to go to a vote. So you heard the motion. All in favor of the motion to the amendments? The motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll move to number 8, bylaws. Maple tapping lease, Howard Mitchell Forest, Dalkeith, action request.
It's moved by Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor Wirt, that bylaw 5288, being a bylaw to enter into a 10-year maple tapping lease with A&B Syrup at the Howard S. Mitchell Forest in Dalkeith, be read in open council, signed and sealed.
Thank you. Mr. Don.
Good morning again, Council. I'd really hoped we would be able to have a pancake breakfast, and I want to show this off because this is essentially what we're agreeing to, some liquid gold, and as you can see here, this is just a mock-up of what could come to be a year from now. We are prepared and ready to for council's support of a maple tapping lease at the Howard S. Mitchell Forest, which is in Dalkeith, or just north of Dalkeith. Exciting opportunity for us and a way to expand our use of our forest property. Just very quickly, in terms of what is contained in the agreement and what commitments we're making on the county side. Number one, we do have to, and we're planning to this summer, go through and do a thinning of the area that would be tapped. It's something that we need to do to just clean up that area so that it's in a good shape for the person to come in, A&B Maple Syrup, to come in and actually tap that area this fall and late or early winter. And essentially what we want to do is, with the material we pull out of that forest, we want to sell it for firewood, and that's going to help offset the cost of us bringing in an electrical service to that property. There is a hydro line on Caillou Lane, but we do want to bring service across the roadway and into the landing area where all the vacuums and whatnot will be, where the collection area is. And so the county will be the owner of that hydro service, but the costs associated with the hydro service, so the annual or the monthly bills plus whatever hydro they're using, that's going to be paid for by A&B Maple Syrup. The lease itself, it's a 10-year agreement where it depends on the size of the trees and how they mature. We're expecting, or we're estimating, approximately 3,000 taps in that forest. Once this lease is signed, they'll have the opportunity to start going in and tapping it and producing by next spring. So that's very exciting. Collection lines will be installed and remain in place, save and except for areas where we identify we want removable lines. There is I would call it informal trail network through that area. So we are going to identify, this is where we want you to remove some of those lines during off-peak season. And we'll work with the applicant if we need to put on some no trespassing signs in certain areas or keep people out of the area. A&B Maple Syrup has been excellent to work with thus far. They really want to, they enjoy this as somewhat of a quasi hobby for the principals of that company. They would like to, if the county's interested, provide some educational opportunities. Maybe there's a lot of opportunity here as we go through the years. So it's a 10-year agreement. There is an opportunity to extend for an additional 5 years. We do have a cost per tap that's included in the agreement at 80 cents a tap. And then after 5 years, we're going to review the market price of syrup and determine if there needs to be an adjustment on that price. And it's just going to be a percentage based on what the percentage market change is. And in speaking with A&B maple syrup, it's relatively stagnant, the maple syrup cost and market. Now, one of the great things that comes out of it is we at the county have the opportunity to get paid either via money or in equivalent value of products. So that's what this was going to show you, is that a year from now we could take some of the value of that in maple syrup, which is fantastic. And our forest, as council knows, it is an FSC certified forest. So one of the nice things that A&B maple syrup will be able to benefit from is they can include that on their labeling, which does open up some different markets for them. So with that, I guess I'll leave it and ask council if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from members of council? Councillor Worden, then Councillor Byfels.
Through Mr. Warden, I think this is a good idea. I like the idea that our forests are being managed in a sustainable, proper way. And I do like the idea of this. So I'm very supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Byfels.
Thank you, Warden. A couple questions, Ben. I did a search of A&B maple syrup, and first of all, they're not part of the Maple Syrup Association in listing via the website. And secondly, they have no web presence whatsoever, because if I put it up, nothing comes back. So can you give me some history on who they are, how long they've been in the business, like some background on it, because I could not find any. Second question is, what is your estimated cost of bringing the power across the road and giving them a service? Because that's still going to be money out of our pocket, and I suspect there's not enough firewood in that bush to pay for that one.
So we are estimating around $3,000 for the hydro service, and that's approximately what we were hoping to pull out of that forest too. Again, it depends on the quality, but we do have somebody who is interested in essentially taking it from us at curbside. So we've got some processes in place ready to go. So we are, like I said, we are hoping for revenue neutral or close to revenue neutral there in terms of that expense. A&B maple syrup, and I agree, I looked up online to understand their online presence, but there isn't much there, and so I can appreciate that comment. I had understood they were part of the maple syrup producers, and I know all of their labeling on their products that I've got. And my understanding, again, I'm not a maple syrup connoisseur, perhaps is the right word, but there are a lot of rules and regulations associated with it. But they are they sell a lot in the Ottawa market, and that's what some of the discussions I've had with the owner. They sell either bulk or at farmers markets. So they are it's all the appropriate labeling and the appropriate grading that's on there. In terms of how long they've been in existence, I don't know, but they do have they're out of the Fournier area, and they do have a bunch of different bushes that they've tapped and are operating. So if there's more information, detailed kind of history of the company, I'd be happy to investigate that for council.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing none. You heard the motion. All in favor? The motion's carried. Thank you. We'll look forward to pancakes next year, Mr. Don. B is the official plan amendment, housekeeping request.
It's moved by Councillor McGillis, seconded by Councillor Worden, that bylaw number 5289, being a bylaw to adopt official plan amendment number 6, a housekeeping amendment to the official plan of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry, be read and passed in open council, signed and sealed.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Good morning, everyone. I am here to present the finalized official plan number 6, which is being a housekeeping amendment to our official plan. I think everybody's probably had the chance to read the report that I prepared, but housekeeping amendments are fairly standard processes that we do that we do go through with either zoning bylaws or official plans on occasion. The current official plan has been in place since 2018. So we've had an official plan in operation, notwithstanding the appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board for the past 3 years. We had noticed in conversations with our local partners, our local planners, that there had been a number of issues that we had been working around with the existing official plan since it came into effect 3 years ago. So this was an opportunity to correct a number of these outstanding issues. As I note in the report, the amendment is essentially composed of 4 categories of amendments, and there are approximately 45 amendments that are being passed through this housekeeping amendment. The first category is the correction of minor grammar, spelling, and formatting errors that are found throughout the document. The second category is the introduction of new text or the editing of existing text to improve the general readability and clarify the interpretation of the plan. In some cases, we did actually have conflicting policies in the plan that we were looking to correct. In other cases, we were dealing with outdated references, etc. We also were correcting mapping errors and reformatting the official plan schedules to ensure that they're more readable by staff members and also by members of the public. So in new formatting, layout, and color scheme associated with those. And then the fourth category was substantive policy changes. So we made a number of changes to reflect current provincial legislation and policy, just bringing the plan into conformity with it, to clarify the permitted uses in various designations, the introduction of additional flexibility in the interpretation of the plan. I'd suggest this is particularly relevant to policies related to natural hazards and floodplain mapping. And then also to address a gap in issues we had related to policies related to waste disposal sites. We didn't have a comprehensive set of policies dealing with waste disposal sites. So the plan was also introducing those policies into the plan. We had a public meeting that was held on the 29th of March regarding the plan. Prior to the public meeting, we had consulted with all of the townships and the local municipalities, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the conservation authorities, and also we received comments from GFL Environmental, who are developing or the owners of a large waste disposal site in North Stormont. So we had received a number of comments from those individuals and those bodies, and we were quite frankly able to successfully implement the vast majority of those comments into the draft amendment that's before council today. So notwithstanding that we did receive a number of comments, they were all very good and helpful comments, and for the most part we were able to incorporate them into the plan. No members of the public did make appearances at the public meeting to express any concerns or opinions on the plan. We simply had the written comments that were received from the bodies that I had mentioned previously. So with that, the recommendation that I have before council today is that due to the fact that we've completed this fulsome review of the plan, we've undertaken the planning process in accordance with the statutory requirements under the Planning Act. I am prepared to make a recommendation before council today for an approval of this amendment, this housekeeping amendment to the plan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hicks. I'll open it up to any questions or comments from members of council. Councillor Byfelds.
Thank you, Warden. Question I have several questions. The first one that I have, Paul, is to deal with the GFL concern. Have you altered the wording that we need to have an amendment after they have all their approvals instead of having them come to us for the amendment with a hold category and then they can go through their approvals? Because I can see their point. They don't want to spend a whole pile of money on approvals and all of a sudden, well, we say no, and then they have to deal with appeals and everything else that comes along with that. Yeah,
through the warden, Mr. Warden, we did make that amendment to the plan. So just for clarification to everybody around the table, the amendment as originally written was requiring that any new waste disposal operator who wanted to establish or expand a facility in SDG would require an amendment to the official plan. And GFL had written into the county to advise that they were concerned about having to apply for an amendment when they want to expand an existing site that's already obtained an official plan amendment to establish itself and has gone through a provincial EA process. So after reviewing that with the representatives from GFL, staff did feel it was appropriate to remove the requirement for an official plan for the expansion of a facility. So if somebody was coming in to establish a new waste disposal site, they would still require an amendment to the official plan. But if that waste disposal site is existing, they do not require an official plan amendment to expand it. That is in keeping with them, also with the policies that we see in a number of our neighboring municipalities, like the City of Ottawa and Prescott Russell as well.
Okay, thank you. Did you have anything further, Councillor Byfeld? Go ahead.
Yes, Warden. One of the things I did notice was about lot sizes and consents. It appears that, and if this was different, this was the way it was before, then I apologize, but I picked it out, is that any lot less than an acre in size would require studies to deal with the possibility of services on that lot. Can you explain why we have to go to up to an acre? Is there Ontario regulations that have changed that, or what is why are we doing it? Because there's many lots out there that are smaller. And in fact, I live on a 0.7 and I've got well, septic, swimming pool, the whole 9 yards, and still lots of room to do what we need to do.
So through you, Mr. Warden, the existing policies in the plan require that when, and this does come from provincial regulation, that when we create a new lot that is going to be on private services, so private well and private septic, if it's under an acre in size, the existing policies in the plan require a hydrogeological study, or what we commonly refer to as a hydro-G study, to study the ground conditions of the lot to ensure that there is sufficient water quality and quantity on the lot, and that the lot can be sized appropriately to accommodate the private septic system. What we were running into in SDG with regards to these policies that do come from the province is that often it's quite excessive to ask for a full hydro-G study of an applicant that's looking to create a lot of just slightly under an acre in size, just as the one that you were mentioning, Councillor Byveld. So the amendments to these policies introduce an additional level of flexibility and discretion on the part of staff to essentially say that in lieu of requiring an applicant to go and undertake a full hydrogeological study to determine whether or not the lot is appropriately sized for a septic system, the staff also have the opportunity to simply request that the applicant submit a septic design in advance or in lieu of a full hydrogeological study. Because we were finding that requirement that's in the plan is overly burdensome on a number of applicants, and we are sometimes requiring or having to require a hydrogeological study for areas that we know we don't have any issues with water quality or quantity. So this is essentially just to provide some additional flexibility that in lieu of a full hydro-G, that staff could just require an appropriate septic design. Mr. Warden, I think you might be on mute.
Yep, thank you. I'll go back to Councillor Byfeld and Councillor Ward after.
Okay, well, and thanks for that clarification, Paul, because I know what's going to happen if we start asking for significant studies on consent lots that people will be challenged. I understand that, you got to have room for a septic system, you got to have water, you got to have all this, and I do remember infamous well driller in our area that always said the first thing somebody should do is drill a well to figure out you got water. Now we're thinking, do we have septic system? And that was never a concern in the past. So I appreciate that, but I want to make sure that, I don't want staff to use this as a hammer that, if it's a 0.98 of an acre, all of a sudden they got to do a fairly expensive hydro-G study just to figure this out. And I can definitely see it on something that's half an acre. So as long as it's reasonable and reasonably applied.
I agree. Thank you. Councillor Ward.
Through you, Mr. Warden, and this is just part of my continuing education about official plans, Paul, but is this housekeeping process that we're involved in today appealable by any circumstance? So in other words, if we pass this, is there any recourse for anybody who may take issue with it, or is this go into the official plan with our sanction?
Through you, Mr. Warden, this is a standard official plan amendment, so just no different than if we were adopting a new official plan, if we were going through an official plan review, or if an individual had come forward to request an official plan amendment. Amendment number 6 is fully appealable to the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal. So pending council's decision today and issuance of the notice of decision, anyone who has made representation during this process can appeal it to the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal. The only thing I would add to that, so there is a 20-day appeal period on this. The only thing that I would add to that is at this stage, if there was any concern on the part of council whether an individual or body was contemplating an appeal, I certainly can't make any promises to that, but certainly there's been no indication through the process that we've been through, particularly with the comments that we've received to date from the bodies that I mentioned, that there's any concern with us approving the plan. Certainly we've been able to incorporate the feedback we've received from everybody into the amendment. So we don't anticipate any appeal of this amendment should it be approved by council today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing none. You heard the motion on the table. All in favor of the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Good day, everybody.
Have a good day. We'll move to C, encroachment agreement 18757 County Road 2 action requests.
It's moved by Councillor Warden, seconded by Councillor Landry, that bylaw number 5290, being a bylaw for the purpose of establishing an encroachment agreement between Dr. Human Gomeshi, be read and passed in open council, signed and sealed.
Thank you. Mr. Don.
Thank you. I'll make this very quick. A very straightforward encroachment agreement that we see on a regular basis. The owner of 18757 County Road 2 is looking to install a water line from the St. Lawrence River into their property. So we would like them to enter into an encroachment agreement so that we have that formalized and that relationship set out in terms of roles and responsibilities and interests. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Pretty self-explanatory. Any questions or comments? Oh, Councillor Byfels.
Thank you, Warden. Question, Ben. Are they doing a road cut or trenchless technology?
Trenchless. That's our standard practice for those ones. So they still have to go through we call it a road cut permit, but we do set out the standards in that road cut permit, and it will be a trenchless install.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing none. All in favor of the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Don. And we'll move to D as the EOC telephone agreement action request.
Moved by Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor McDonald, that bylaw number 5291, being a bylaw to authorize an agreement between the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas and Glengarry and Bell Canada to provide landline services, be read and passed in open council, signed and sealed.
Thank you. Mike, please.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So the county admin building is designated as our primary emergency operations center. And while we do have a voice over IP telephone system there that can provide great flexibility in case of an emergency and we have to operationalize, provincial regulations mandate that the OEC have appropriate and redundant telecommunication system. So this is an agreement for 3 years for 3 copper telephone lines. So again, I've said before, they're probably one of the most robust. The voice over IP can go down, but then the phone lines would be our backup system. Just to note that we already have these lines, just a renewal. The contract was up to renewal of the agreement, and entering in the 3-year agreement will save us $1,800 over the 3-year term.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Not seeing none. All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
And we'll move to the consent agenda.
Moved by Councillor Gardner, seconded by Councillor Armstrong, that all items listed under the consent agenda section of the agenda be approved as recommended.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you. We'll move to boards and committees. Joint liaison committee, Mr. Councillor Fraser or Councillor Byfeld, sorry.
No meeting.
Okay, thank you. And the library board, I'll ask Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. We had a meeting on the 8th of April, and some of the topics that we covered, we revisited and reaffirmed our French services policy at the library. We also, library staff are partnering with Eastern Ontario Health Unit to support the vaccination, the application or applying to have your to receive your vaccine. If anyone had difficulties, the members of the library or staff of the library are going to support anyone that had any trouble. They could just contact sdglibrary.ca for further information. And the ongoing library programs, our staff are really working hard to serve our communities with some of their programs. And unfortunately, due to the latest lockdown, I think some of those activities would be curtailed, but the effort is there nonetheless. And as we speak at our library board meeting, we are very appreciative of all their efforts. And I'm sure Mrs. Franklin will have further to add to what my report has. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Okay, thank you. Well said. We'll move to the Police Services Board. Councillor Wirt, Councillor McGillis.
I guess we've had one meeting, and we obviously, it's been public now for quite a while that Mark Hemrick is our new detachment commander in Long Sault. And we also formalized the administration for the police board itself, and Dennis Fife will stay on as chair. But Brian, is there anything else there that you would like to add?
You can say that you nominated somebody for first vice chair if you want.
Sorry, yeah, Dan Parkinson will take first vice. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, thank you for the update. Eastern Ontario Health Unit, we haven't had a meeting, Councillor Williams and myself, for lengthy period of time, so we'll have that discussion, I guess, in regards to when our next meeting will be. I think there's an opportunity that we should be having more meetings, especially with everything that's been taking place. We will look into that a little bit further. And Glenstone Lodge, Councillor Warden.
Through you, Mr. Warden, we have not had a meeting since our last county council, and as far as I understand, everything is well there.
Okay, thank you. And Cornwall and Area Housing, Councillor Smith.
Amalgamation between the CHC and the City of Cornwall are being finalized, and I'm not sure exactly where that's going to put County Council in regards to future funding and input, or how this will affect the rental properties within our townships. We have a meeting next week, and those are questions I'll be asking, and hopefully bringing the answers back to Council in May. If there's anything else, Councillor Wirt.
Okay, thank you. And the St. Lawrence River Institute, Councillor Gardner.
Meeting this week.
Okay, thank you. And Raisin South Nation Source Water Protection, Councillor Williams. Nothing. And last but not least, the Municipal Advisory Algonquin Land Claim, Councillor Fraser.
Nothing to report, Mr. Warden.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Warden. I would just like to take a minute to update council on a couple of committees that I've been appointed to, fairly recently. One is the regional, what's it called? Complicated. Regional Emergency Response Council. Now, I was appointed to this committee at the onset of the pandemic, and this committee has done some good work, and throughout the year it has actually met on a weekly basis and has distributed over $1 million in the last year of funding to all of the social service agencies across SDG and Cornwall. And this money has gone into the hands of these agencies who are effectively battling the impacts of COVID on the front lines. So the work this organization, and that's all been through the United Way, and all of the social service agencies are represented on this committee. And I just wanted to point out that this committee has also been responsible for distributing upwards of some close to 5,000 food hampers over the last year. So you've probably read about it or heard about it in the newspapers. And this has been a very important and effective way to help those who are most vulnerable during COVID cope. And so that's some good work that's been done through that committee. The other committee, as you know, County Council has funded the Eastern Ontario Agri-Food Network to the tune of $25,000 over the next 3 years. I've been appointed to sit on that committee. And we're just getting going with some new members on there, including Cornwall, as you know, is a new member on there as well. And so what we've been working on is understanding what the strategic priorities of that organization is. There's been an effort on behalf of some of us board members to keep the priorities reined in so that the organization isn't biting off more than it can chew, and to make sure that it's effective in its work. So that's just a brief update on those two committees. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williams. Before I go to Councillor Byfelds, Mrs. Castleman, can we have these committees added to the next boards and committee reports, just so Mrs. Williams can bring more information? Thank you. Councillor Byfelds.
Sorry, Mr. Warden, I was incorrect. We did have a meeting, so I'm just scanning through the agenda and some of the highlights. First highlight for County Council is that Councillor Todd Bennett from the City of Cornwall is now the chair of the committee. As for highlights going through the report, there was some concern from paramedic services and Mr. Lister concerning making sure they had enough paramedics recruited to continue on with services. They actually had to delay some of the new services coming forward. And the other difference or a key thing that came forward was in Ontario Works. There is a change that the province had already started on how Ontario Works was going to go ahead, and it'll be more centralized. So the city is working with the province on how they're phasing that in, but normally a lot of things stop through COVID, but this one did not. So anyway, they were the highlights of that meeting, which was just after our last county council meeting. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Is there any questions or comments for any members of council in regards to any of the committees? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. This is more of a comment about the good work by the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. We had a mass vaccination clinic held in North Dundas at the Winchester Arena on the slab. The goal, I'm not sure if it was achieved, but I'm sure if it, I'm quite confident it would have been, was to immunize 1,000 people on Friday past. It was a busy, cold, damp start to the day. It was a busy day and it got a little bit warmer, but the general feeling was appreciation. The volunteers, there were many. The volunteers did an excellent job. The health unit did an excellent job. There were 14 people administering the vaccine, and it went very rapidly. There was great success and great appreciation for all the efforts from the health unit and the volunteers that supported that effort. There were people from across Dundas County that I met, that I know, and I'm not sure how much further afoot they came from. I do believe some came from North Grenville and elsewhere in SDG. But one comment that came up, and we've been harping about this as members of County Council, they struggled with the internet service. They needed to have their secure internet. They needed to stick with, as directed by the ministry. They needed to use theirs solely and not piggyback onto ours at the arena. It wasn't secure enough. But it speaks to the ministry is demanding and requiring secure service for internet for obvious reasons. but yet not able to provide it in North Dundas, provide it in Winchester, and provide it for a clinic where they're trying to process 1,000 people in a day. It just speaks to the definite need we have to get that program rolling, and for the province to recognize how they're not supporting it well enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fraser. Any other comments or questions? Thank you. Not seeing none, we'll move right into key information, transportation and planning 2021 road tour. Mr. Don.
Thank you. I just wanted to give council, I guess, some formal closure to the fact that obviously the way the state of the world is right now, it doesn't make any sense for us to try and coordinate a spring road tour as we normally would around this time of year. What I'm suggesting to council is that depending on how things go over the next couple of months as we look at a road tour in the fall, and what that could actually be related to is looking ahead to 2022 projects and maybe checking in on some of the things we're still working on in 2021. So my suggestion to council is we kind of pause that, and I'll revisit it again in September, unless council wants to say, let's just look at it next year. The other thing I do want to note informally, which would have been something we would have covered under the road tour, is Tim and I were able to meet with the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario recently to discuss the intersection of County Road 44, which is Headline Road on the opposite side of the roadway, and Highway 138. And I'm pleased to note that the ministry is moving ahead with the design of that work. So they're going to be awarding the design assignment to a consultant in the very near future, which is a positive step to move that forward. So my suggestion is that we continue to engage with the ministry. They've made that commitment to keep us in the loop as that project progresses. Once they've got a design done, then we're in a great position to advocate to get that work done and get it done sooner rather than later. So with that, I'll leave it for council.
Okay, thank you. I think council would be in favor of waiting till the fall in regards to looking at the projects, and hopefully we can look at projects that were done in 2021 and see what the future projects will be in 2022. So thank you. And we'll move to transportation and planning, Warden's House renovations and administration building for the roof.
Thank you. So I'm going to, with your indulgence, Mr. Warden, I'm going to kind of split this report up into two separate things. The first thing I want to talk about, and it's relatively detailed in the report. The first thing we're looking for some direction or for some, I guess direction from council on is with respect to the roof. I'm just going to quickly share my screen so you can see. I've summarized in a quick slide kind of what our options are. For roof. Right now we have budgeted for the 3-tab or designer tab style of roof, and if we do look to go to an enhanced type of product, we can go to a slate style roof, which would add $20,000 onto our existing budget. That is actually of interest, and I read it in a history book somewhere. That was actually that we had the building was cladded with a slate tile at its inception. So that does kind of return it more to the historical look that it had before. What we have found as well through our investigations is that the price of steel right now is gone through the roof. So there's quite a bit of volatility in here. We've done a best guess at what kind of extra cost some kind of custom steel roof with either the panels or a steel shingle would cost, but it's pretty substantial additional costs. But if that's something council does want to entertain, we're happy to pursue that a little bit further. So these are rough estimates based on the total area that we'd be re-roofing or redoing, which is essentially all the shingled parts of the building, which includes Warden's House, the historic courtroom, as well as the historic administration area. So it's a pretty significant square footage. So maybe with that, with your indulgence, Mr. Warden, I can get some feedback on that, and then we'll move to the next part of the report.
Okay, I lost everyone, Mr. Don, so if you can just get out of the report, or am I gone?
Am I still sharing? I thought I had turned that off.
Oh, I think it's me, to be honest.
Okay.
How come I can't find anybody here? What am I doing wrong?
You see, click view, Mr. Warden.
Pardon me?
View,
I can't
click view. Click view on your top right hand.
I don't even see our screen any longer. That's the issue. Not sure how it disappeared on me here, but
is there the Zoom icon on the bottom of the screen, Mr. Warden?
No, I have nothing. Hang on.
It's the blue TV or camera. The bottom.
Yeah, 1 second. Oh, there we go. I'm not sure how that happened, but thank you. Okay, so I'll open it up to questions or comments from members of council. Councillor Byfelds and then Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Warden. I know that some of us had a desire to at least look at steel, and I do appreciate Ben and his crew looking at it, but I think the costs are a little, I wouldn't say beyond our needs, but don't make any logical sense. But I do like the slate look. It would give that historic building a little bit of class compared to just putting on the standard shingles of today. So that would be my leaning to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And I'm one of those that would have, I think, appreciated the longevity and the robustness of the steel roof. I am just, I realize construction costs and material, the pricing has gone up in such a fashion that it's tough to understand. But to have, well, let me go back, please, Mr. DeHaan. In North Dundas, we have some smaller, much smaller projects where we decide not to put shingles on. We put steel on for the length of time that, just for durability. And at one time, the feeling around the council table, or my feeling was years ago, that we couldn't afford steel. And then it was presented to me that yes, there's a small difference, maybe 30 or 40% at the most increase in the price to have the extra quality and the lifespan increased. I just can't get my head around the idea that it's gone from $400 a square for a high quality shingle to $2,200 per square for tin. That is, I don't know, maybe an engineer can do the math for me, but is that 5,000% increase or difference? And it just seems quite unreasonable. And could we search for someone else to give us a quote on that? Because it is quite a change in my mind. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Thank you. Any comments, Mr. Don?
Yeah, I can certainly comment. I mean, we did seek the advice of a contractor who had previously done it, and it is, keep in mind, it is quite a substantial area. It's not a small square footage. One of the things, and of course, I don't have the exact kind of breakdown. There was, like I said, a significant amount of volatility right now in the steel market, so there is that driving that. And the other part of it too is, and I can speak from my own personal experience, is whenever you are doing a steel roof, it's one thing if you can kind of bring it up on ladders. It's another thing altogether when you're working on a building of this kind of height and whatnot. Like your typical shingles, you can still use some of those quick ways of getting it up, but a steel roof, when you have panels that are of a significant length, I imagine it becomes, it adds that much more to the project in terms of being able to get the material up there and how you fasten it and all the prep work that goes along with it. So I agree with you, because that was my first kind of thought when we were looking at some of these prices. But kind of the more I kind of digest it, you go, okay, yeah, I can see how all of a sudden we're adding a pretty substantial amount to it. And one thing I do want to mention too, Council had asked the question about how old these shingles were. We investigated quite significantly trying to figure out if we could get an age on it, and our best guess is that we're in the 15 to 20 year age of the existing shingles. So we've actually had some pretty good. They've performed actually much better than we would have estimated when we originally started working on this project. So that's just some context for council, and sorry I don't have more detailed information, but that's the reality is I guess I'm not. The more we thought about it, the more we're not as overly shocked with the price, and it is we can continue to shop around if that's something council wants us to do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wirt.
Yeah, just from my perspective, I would suggest that we go with slate if we're going to do this in this fiscal year. It's going to give us the look and obviously more durability than the regular shingle. But I do agree with Councillor Fraser that if it's cost effective at all in the future, perhaps next year, that steel should be considered, because it certainly has the performance record that I think we're looking at. But I guess it depends on your appetite for how quickly we get this job done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mr. Don, are you hoping to have it done in 2021? Is that your goal?
It is, but we are pulling it from reserves, so it's not like we've budgeted and we've taxed for it. We are pulling it to, it had been historically taxed, and we're using reserves to help pay for it. So it's the roof, we are losing shingles. We have lost shingles. So it's in a state where it does need to get repaired, but we're not, it's not leaking yet either. So if council, is looking for us to defer this for another year and do some detailed investigations, we can. But, my suggestion is, I think we're comfortable, just given the age that we got out of those existing shingles. That suggests to me that we've got good kind of, it's not overly exposed. It's got good ventilation up there, so we're seeing some relatively good performance from the style of shingles we've had in the past. So that's why I'm comfortable with either the designer tab or a slate style if council wants to kind of up the look of it. That's what we go with.
Okay, thank you. I think if we're going to go to a shingle style, I think it's the slate look would be the better look for the county building. So we have a two-part question. One is I'm going to ask for who's in favor of the slate look shingles, and if nobody's in favor of that, then the next one would be if we're prepared and willing to wait till next year to see if the price of metal comes down. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Ben, how visible is that roof from the street or the sidewalk?
The warden's one would be.
I would say, yeah, they mostly are. I mean, the way the building is kind of set up with the hip roofs, like you can see those shingles. I do think it. I think aesthetically it'll make an improvement to the building if we go with a little bit more of a fancier shingle.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll ask who's in favor in regards to going to shingles with the slate look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And who's opposed? The motion is carried. So Mr. Don, you'll move forward with the shingles in regards to the slate look for 2021.
Yeah, we'll get on that right away. So part 2 of the report has to do with the Warden's House renovations, as well as I think a little bit more of a higher level discussion about the jail itself. So if you'll indulge me, one of the things we had really hoped to do with council was to provide a nice, do an actual walking tour. And of course, again, where the pandemic challenges us, but we've got Todd to really help us out with this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to play a quick video for council, and it's going to give you an overview of the Warden's House jail area, just so that you get a sense of some of the long-term direction we're looking for from council, as well as just some confirmation that we can proceed to tender with the Warden's House. So here we go. I'm going to go to this and share sound and video. And share. So just give me a quick second while I close presentation. Okay, here we go.
The county administration complex, located at 26 Pitt Street in Cornwall, can be broken down into 5 distinct areas. The historic SDG jail and courthouse was built in 1830. There is also the Warden's House, built in 1859, as well as the original administration building, which was built in 1885, an administration wing, built in 1950, and the general population area of the former jail, built in 1990, complete the administration complex. The historic SDG jail and courthouse includes an upper floor, which houses the county council chambers. The jail area, on the main floor, has been renovated over the decades, but the original layout of 1830 remains. Because of the age of the structure, significant deterioration is taking place in many areas, including crumbling plaster, minor window leaks, and floors that are at the end of their life. The area is not being used for any purpose at this time, as the jail has been closed to visitors due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Warden's House was converted to office space in 1971. Its last full-time use was by Cornwall and the county's tourism. It has been used as the starting point for jail tours in recent years, and its exterior has been refreshed. However, some structural improvements are needed before the Warden's House can be used as an office again. It should be noted that the only interior connections to the Warden's House is through the council chambers. Several other connection options are possible, but they impact different areas of the jail. The general population section of the jail holds no historical elements and was built within the old courtyard on the property. It includes a general population cell block with common area, infirmary, commercial kitchen, and a subterranean tunnel that leads to a spiral staircase going to the courtroom on the 3rd floor of the administration wing. The commercial kitchen is leased to a catering company, but this area is also seeing significant aging and damage. This area is not being currently used. The county administration complex also includes the original administration building as well as an administration wing. These sections are used by the transportation, planning, and corporate services staff, as well as GIS, finance, provincial offenses, and the SDG library.
Thank you. I just want to confirm everybody was able to see and hear all of that. Great. Okay. This is kind of a two-part part of this report. The first part is related to the renovations at the Warden's House. We have completed, we talked about this at a previous council meeting, we've completed the detailed design to do the structural rehabilitation to the Warden's House. We have an estimate of that work to be $181,000, and that's doing replacement of ground floor, load-bearing walls, electrical communications routing, interior finishes, etc. So, and that includes working in and around designated substances. So we're looking to get council's approval to put that out to tender, because there was, at the time we last talked about that, some hesitancy with respect to that. And from staff's perspective, this, being challenged with in the pandemic and providing space and some of the changes and growth we're seeing within the organization, we are, we do need some office space. I recognize it is some work and some investment there, but we're at a state where we can kind of create some pretty decent office space in this building at what is relatively low cost compared to doing something new. Part two of that work, so staff are recommending that we go out to tender, subject to council's kind of support of that process. In the video too, we alluded, Todd, and thanks for that work, alluded to the challenges we have with the actual connections. So the connections, of course, if you can imagine, you didn't want too many connections between a jail and areas where people work. So there are limited connections between those two. We had also looked at providing a better connection between the buildings. What we found was the cost for that work, so that was done as a separate design assignment and then paid for through COVID funding. The design came back with a price of $131,000 to do that connection, and we felt that from a staff's perspective, that it doesn't make sense at this point. It exceeds the value that we'd get to just create a better and more efficient connection. So we're from staff's perspective, we're saying let's hold off on proceeding with that, but we believe there is value in getting that structural rehab done of the Warden's House. It's only going to benefit that building going forward. So perhaps I'll pause there and look for some comments back from council before we wrap up the discussion about the whole area.
Sorry, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'm really having trouble. I was really hoping for a personal tour through there. I'm really having trouble envisioning what area is going to be renovated, the size, the shape, the practicality of the space. I'm really not envisioning that. And so I'm also concerned about the access of that space through council chambers. It just doesn't seem practical to me unless you can actually get, good access and flow of staff back and forth through, a different way. When people cross over, initially, then they'll be trapped there. Let's say, if there's stuff going on in council chambers, they won't be able to get back through, it seems to me. So I don't know. To me, there are too many questions yet for me to feel comfortable moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Don, can you maybe just verify or explain exactly where the access would be from the council chambers? Sure, I'm happy to. Just
quickly here. I trust you can see my screen. I'm just going to use Google to make it a little bit easier. So this area, and I hope you can see kind of my mouse that I'm circling around. That's the warden's house, and that I want to say we could create 6 offices in there, and really 6 offices, more or less. You know, that area is kind of set up as office space already. The work that's being contemplated as part of what we have ready to go out to tender is really just to support underneath it to make sure that the building is meets current design code. So we're, you know, in terms of what we're contemplating, it's not necessarily to create offices. The offices are there. It's actually really to strengthen and support that building so that it's, you know, good to go forward in the future. And a lot of the work, quite frankly, takes place in the crawl space in the basement underneath, not necessarily up on the top floor, but the main floor, yes, as well. We do have to redo a wall through there. So that's the work that takes place there. Now, again, I'm going to kind of use this aerial view to help describe. To get into the warden's house without having to go outside right now, you go in through the council chambers, go down that historical staircase that goes into the front of the building, and then you walk through the jail on the main floor, and there's an opening between these 2 walls that gets into the warden's house. So that's why it's such an inefficient connection point. What we had contemplated and what we had the design prepared for was actually a connection through general population, which is back in this area. And the challenge is this is its own separate building that was built later on, and that creates a challenge for us because it is kind of standalone. It's got its own foundations. So you're you know, in essence, you're creating a bridge between the 2 buildings to be able to connect those 2. But I guess and it kind of gets into the next part of my what I wanted to talk with council about, and what Mike and I and our department needs to understand from council is where do we want to go with you know, parts of this building. We have a beautiful historic jail, which is underneath here, which has been modernized, but you know, there's opportunities there to kind of bring it back to a more historical look and feel. Because this jail was used until the late 90s to house inmates, and it was all part of one big complex. So they had built this section in the back here, which was built to more modern standards, but no historical elements to it. Underneath the council chambers, there's a bunch of historical elements that are there, but it has been modernized, so it doesn't. You can see some of the old windows and some of the old doors, but you can see how there's the potential to kind of bring it back to its old historic roots. And then it leads into the question, well, how do we want to, if we do want to create some more efficient connections to this office here, you know, do we want to impact that historical area? And to be frank with you, that's why we thought going through the general population area made a lot more sense, because it doesn't limit or it doesn't impact kind of the historical opportunities there. That said, if council, you know, doesn't, you know, wants to kind of, if a vision is more to kind of bring it back to a more historical route, you know, maybe there's nothing we want to do here. Maybe we want to tear this down because we are heating it. There are some kind of throwaway costs every year that without jail tours or anything like that, we're not really, you know, gaining value from a lot of square footage there. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the kind of discussion. Not only do we want to talk about, you know, fixing up this warden's house and making sure it's structurally sound, but wanted to get, and I'm not looking for answers today, but really just get a sense from council, how do we want to entertain the discussion about the jail itself, and kind of, do we have some general ideas that we can bring forward? Because we can do feasibility studies, we can have a special meeting of council to kind of, and staff can give you 5 or 6 different ideas, and we can bat that around. It's really kind of the ball's in the air, but we do need some direction. And I know, you know, Tim can attest to this has been something that's been on our minds for many years.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Simpson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, there's a lot of information there, and as Ben said, we're not looking for decisions today. We're just outside of what the tender and stuff like that. But as Ben said, it's something we've been discussing for a long time. The underutilization of the space, particularly in the warden's house. Council recall that you know, we spent a considerable amount of money a few years ago on the facade of that building and the outside of the building, and I've heard nothing but compliments about that and how it looks. There's some structural issues that I think need to be taken care of underneath. But in terms of the office space, it would take very little money. It more or less needs a facelift, and as Ben said, Cornwall and the county's tourism were tenants in there for quite a long time. So we essentially would like to repatriate that office space and use it, because right now it's just sitting vacant. We're heating it, and quite frankly, we have a need. With COVID and space regulations and so on and so forth, we're not in the office right now, but we anticipate being in the coming months. So we could really use that space, and I think if we could use it, we would use it smartly to make sure that we co-locate staff. We'd figure it out from an efficiency point of view, who would go in there and what linkages there would be. As I said, I think the first step to that is making sure the floor is stable, because you can't really, and Councillor Williams, I think, made a good part. The picture's worth 1,000 words, but actually being there is worth 1,000,000 words. You have to walk around underneath the warden's house to get a real appreciation of, I think it's hemlock, which really don't hardly exist anymore, but hand-hewed hemlock that are 2 or 3 feet across support that, and it's old and it needs a facelift. But I mean, that's just a testament to how well it was built, but it does need some structural work. So that's all I have to add, Mr. Warden. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think the request right now is to allow Mr. DeHaan to go out to tender for the structural work underneath the warden's house. So I guess I'm just looking for a show of hands if everybody's in favor of Councillor McGillis.
Councillor Armstrong had his hand up before me, if that's okay.
Go ahead if you're on now, and I'll go to Councillor Armstrong.
Okay, I was just trying to be polite.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just from what I've seen, I mean, I don't think the council needs to go through the building. I mean, we're not engineers, or we're not, most of us are not carpenters, but I've seen the structural part of that building, and I mean, in terms of the strength and what it can hold with the size of those beams, they'll outlive all of us and our grandchildren. If it's a change to the structural because of to upgrade it to look better for the aesthetic part of it, yes, it's an old type. But what I want to say here is, like, I'd like to see this the building being preserved as in terms of the historical part as much as possible. But with respect to the structural, there's no indication to me where there's no structural issue. That the weight of those beams will hold a team of horses. I know I have buildings like that too, and I don't see any rot to those beams. So where's the evidence that we need to replace those beams? Because it's going to be costly to do that part. And why are we going to tender for the structural part?
Thank you. I'll go to Mr. Don if you want to answer those comments before we move to Mr. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Yeah, and that might, it's been a while since council's kind of had that information in front of them, and that was back when Helen was looking after the building, or Miss Thompson, excuse me, was looking after the building. We had started to talk about bringing staff out there kind of almost immediately as we were returning back to the office, kind of from the first wave of COVID. And so we said, well, it's been a while since people have been in there. Let's just make sure that we're okay to, kind of make sure structurally everything's sound. And that's kind of what precipitated all of this, is that the report that came back said, no, you do have to do some improvements. So to your point, Councillor McGillis, yeah, there's a bunch of beams in there that are going to outlive all of us for sure. But what we see, and it was kind of quick in that video, but what has happened is over the years, as we put in, hot water and electricity and HVAC and ductwork, contractors have gone in and notched a lot of those beams out. So although we have a beef of a beam, a lot of it's missing. A lot of that cross section is now missing as we've kind of, as these kind of one-off improvements have, I guess, put it at more of risk. So this is our opportunity before anybody's in there, is to make it structurally sound, make it strong, and make it to, kind of comply with building code right now, because it doesn't comply with building code.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Armstrong. And Mr. Armstrong, I apologize for missing you earlier.
That's all right. It made me feel at home, sir. and I do thank Councillor McGillis for the politeness. It's much appreciated. I want to sort of echo actually what Councillor McGillis was saying, in that he rightfully pointed out, and he could have actually, if it was possible, highlighted my square when he said that we are not builders and we are not designers, because I would be the poster boy for not being a builder or a designer. So it is a little bit, these are always difficult discussions for myself without, as Councillor Williams said, without actually being there to have it explained and sort of pointed out. Conceptually looking at drawings and things like that is certainly not my strong point. I do, one of the questions that Mr. DeHaan asked is, should we have a special meeting, or should we have, what type of meeting should we have? I think this clearly tells me we should have a meeting. We should have a meeting much like what when we had our visioning exercise, and finally have, if this council is willing to, finally nail down what our vision is for this building, answer or try to answer all of these questions that are done. It's no shock to any of you what I'll say next. I mean, I clearly believe that, especially in this hot real estate market, we should be getting this building ready for sale and actually house ourselves within the confines geographically of SDG. I know I'm pretty much alone on that, but it's certainly something I think I'd like to hear everybody's explanation of why they're okay with being in the city of Cornwall and not SDG, but that's for a different day. As far as okaying renovations now, I think it's a very difficult question, just again, you know, to make it anecdotal, but personal, from somebody who's trying to have a fence built and a kitchen put in, and the prices change daily. So I don't know, are we, is it the thought of council that we're in a position where prices are going to not peak for years, or are they going to level out? Is the market going to correct itself? Are we getting ahead of ourselves by spending money now on materials that are skyrocketing, but may balance out in the next year? I mean, I don't expect anybody to have the answers, but these are certainly questions we should be pondering while we do it. You know, perhaps steel does balance out next year. If we delay it, it's more palatable. I mean, I don't know. You've posed some very difficult questions, Mr. DeHaan. I would hope that we would sort of defer to doing the minimum amounts that we can and see how the landscape bears itself out over the next year for the final term of our year. So I don't want to get too far ahead of doing things, do the things that need to be done. And I think we could have philosophical discussions as to balancing out a taxpayer's dollar to convenience and efficiency of getting from one office to another office. For instance, if it's going to take 5 minutes longer, but save into the tens of thousands of dollars, I mean, I'd like to see that sort of balance out in ratio. Thank you.
Good points, Councillor Armstrong. Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Armstrong. I think the landscape is changing at a rapid pace, and I know for staff meetings and all that fun stuff, it's good to have staff together, but the landscape has changed even as far as telecommuting and that type of things. So I think things need to settle a little bit before we make a huge commitment on this. And I do like the potential of maybe, you know, having a visioning session to see where this is going to go. I have been on the jail tour and I thought it was worthwhile. It was a great night out with a bunch of friends to escape the jail. So, you know, I think that there's a broader discussion that has to occur. I think, you know, obviously doing things if there's a safety issue or whatever, fair enough. But I think as far as planning it, I think we're still in upheaval. You know, whether it's the price of things or just the way we do things or whatever the case may be. So I would like to defer the bulk of this, I think.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Mr. Don. Then Councillor Fraser, did you have your hand up? Okay, thank you. Mr. Don.
Thank you. And I guess a couple things I want to, and I'm hearing council loud and clear, and I totally agree that it's a great idea to have a visioning, because we as staff need that direction, whether it's we're not investing $1 in this place and looking to build somewhere else, or that, you know, what we want to do with the building, because I think we got to do something. We can't just leave it the way it is. You saw that video. But that being said, I do want to turn back to the renovation that we're talking about specifically. I don't see that that's a throwaway cost, regardless of what our future vision is, because that it needs to be done. If I may, it's something that structurally needs to be done. It's going to add value to the to this place one way or the other, either through office space or it's something that the next person doesn't have to deal with if they're trying to create office space in there, or just make reasonable use of that space because of the challenges we have structurally there. So and last thing too is that, you know, that is going out to tender, coming back to council to have, you know, for council to have its say whether they want to award the tender or not. And at that point too, we'll understand much better in terms of how much funding, because there is an extensive amount of funding out there for these types of works, which are trying to create space for staff and trying to provide better workspace for staff in a safe manner. So, you know, my suspicion is that we will be, if not fully funded, pretty close to fully funded to be able to do this work, which again adds value to it. So if I could make a recommendation to council, I'd say let's go out to tender, and then if there's real philosophical challenge with awarding that tender, then we stop it there rather than pausing right now and then potentially losing a construction season, or potentially losing that opportunity to get in there at some point in the near future with some staff properly spaced.
Okay, thank you. So who's in favor in regards to going out to tender now, so that we have some numbers in place in regards to where we want to move in the future? Show of hands, please.
If I may, Mr. Warden, I did want to have a comment before we got in.
Yes, further. My apologies, Councillor.
Yes, and the question is, Mr. Dahan, whenever I read the first line of the second line of the warden's house, the background, November estimated $300,000. Is that the number from November, or is that a current number?
No, the current number is 181. We had done, so the current estimate is 181. 300,000, because of the asbestos and some of the nasty stuff we were dealing with, they were, you know, in fairness, until you know exactly what that scope of work is and what you have to do to contain that material, it can be very, very expensive to work in that material. So I have no qualms with the fact that they had $300,000, and then now that they've actually been able to scope it, figure out the areas they're disturbing, that they can support without disturbing stuff, we have a much more refined number. So 181,000 is what we're estimating this structural kind of strengthening of the building would cost.
And my comment, just to continue on with that in that same vein, I'd be surprised. I'm surprised that there was a thought of $300,000, and now it's a thought of or a quote of $181,000. When I think of the things that go around at my house and how the prices have escalated, sometimes have quadrupled in the last 3 months, and so I think the $181,000 is way off the mark. It just from anecdotal evidence, what I've experienced and what others have experienced. I do support or agree that money has to be put into any old building, and old buildings are expensive to maintain. Old buildings are expensive to make modern. The philosophical question is out there, and I don't think I don't believe that the Councillor Armstrong is the only one that has those thoughts. The philosophical question about where we need to be located and how much money we plan to spend. I think we need a better estimate than $181,000, and we do need to have the philosophical discussion about the future of that building and the future of where we will be located. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Byfelds.
Thank you, Warden. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I do agree with Ben on fixing up the house. I think it gives it that structural integrity we need anyway. It's going to add value to it, and I understand that. You know, I did come back saying you always got to be cautious of the replacing old stuff, because old stuff costs a lot of money. But I think there's some reasonable ways of getting around some of the stuff, and that makes logical sense. As for, you know, we might as well use the building. We fixed it up. We're halfway there. Finish the rest off. Use what we can in it. The other old jail cells, or technically not old, the new jail cells. To me, that building there needs a real good thought process on what we're going to do with it, because there it sits. And if all we do is heat it and make it look deal with some of the headaches, we may need to have a real good discussion on where we go forward with that, and either we use it or you lose it. As for the discussion on where we're going to, if we should stay in the city of Cornwall, and I realize philosophy, theory, we should not be within the city. Many county governments sit within a city of a separated city. Leeds Grenville's in Brockville. Others are in other jurisdictions that they're not located within the county because of historic reasons. At one time, Cornwall was part of the counties. You know, I would be really challenged to move out of a historic building like we have, and even if it's located not in our geographical jurisdiction, to move to a middle of nowhere field in downtown Avonmore because it's in the center of the county, really does not make any logical sense. And I know we shouldn't sit here and talk. We can be here forever talking this one through, but we should at least, even if we wanted to move, if we get the whole, the majority of council to decide we need to move, spending 180 or 200 grand on this building at least gives it its value. I don't want to spend any more time on that, but anyway, I'll leave it up to you, Warden. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Going to a discussion in regards to staying in Cornwall or moving out, I think is another discussion for another day, because I think that'll be a lengthy discussion or debate in regards to different members of council. I will go to one more comment or question from Councillor Armstrong, and then we'll ask for a motion or go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, for allowing me that. I do agree with one thing that Councillor Byveld said, and that's why I didn't bring it up or delve into the discussion. I do, however, take a little bit of umbrage with saying I don't want to talk any further on it and then making a little speech that nobody can reply to. So I do appreciate that, especially when you're going to make statements like going to some place in the middle of nowhere and having where no one has ever suggested that. And that's an unfair statement to start, to leave this sort of discussion at and throw out some simplistic sort of statement that nobody's ever made. I was talking about a true and real discussion of sharing philosophies between the other people that sit around the table and using locations that we all thought were applicable. So I think that's just a little bit of grandstanding that was unnecessary, and I'm going to point it out. So hopefully we'll have a proper discussion at the proper time, and we'll.
Oh, sorry, you went on mute. Okay.
It's good. I'm done. I just want to make that statement. I don't think we need to make these little speeches and throw out silly things that nobody's ever said.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on. So I'm just looking for a show of hands in regards to if we're interested in going to tender to see what kind of numbers we're getting back in regards to supporting the structure, I guess, of the warden's house. So can I have show of hands who's in favor of moving forward with at least the tender, not saying we're going to go ahead with the work. Mrs. Castleman.
Through you, Mr. Warden, I have drafted a formal motion if you'd like to formally, so we can capture it in the minutes.
Please do.
It will require a mover and seconder. It reads that council directs staff to proceed with the tender for the structural work at the warden's house.
Okay, thank you. If I can have somebody move and second, please. Moved by Councillor Warden, second by Councillor Byfels. All in favor of the motion?
And
motion
through
is.
Mr. Warden, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I do have a formal motion as well to formally direct staff regarding the roof, so that it's captured in the minutes as well, if you'd like me to read that.
Okay, so the other motion was carried, so go ahead with this one. Thank you.
Thank you. That council directs staff to proceed with a slate-style shingle roof for the county administration building.
You need a mover and seconder also, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Okay, it was moved by Councillor Gardner and second by Councillor Laundrie. You heard the motion. All in favor of the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Castleman. Okay, there's no motions or notice of motions, petitions, miscellaneous business, unfinished business summary. So we will go directly into closed session. Sorry,
Mr. Warden, I apologize for the late. I meant to contact you earlier. I was just wondering if I could bring up one question in the miscellaneous business for council.
Sure. Yep, go ahead.
Given the unprecedented time that we find ourselves in for all of us and the things that we're dealing with, and the ever-changing landscape and the lockdowns on, lockdowns off, I was wondering if it might be possible for us to invite our MPP to appear at our next meeting or one of our meetings, because there's been a lot of town halls. There certainly has been communication. We've made singly as municipalities petitions to our MPP. We've made it as the United Counties. You've made statements, sir. The Mayor Clement has made statements. But I think it would behoove our MPP to show up at one of our meetings. It's been over, we're into the second year now, And there's a lot of questions that people have, and I'm wondering if you would think that that's inappropriate, or if it would be an appropriate time. I mean, I think the Ontario government has done a good job in many ways, but I think, to be quite blunt, we've been failed in Eastern Ontario in many ways as well. And it would be nice to have, with this round going on, and without making a big speech, but all of us, I think it's fair to say that we're all suffering economically the same as to different levels, but we're all sort of in the similar boat. I think our mom and pop shops, I think of our hairdressers and things like that, that everybody's suffering sort of unilaterally. And, you know, yes, finally they've made steps to stop big box stores from having more than 25% people inside there, but they've made their millions of dollars. I don't know, I can speak at least for North Dundas, I don't know how many of those shops are going to survive this time. I'd like to hear from our MPP. He does represent us, and we are the people sitting around the table that represent the bulk of his municipalities, obviously without the city of Cornwall. It would be nice to have him here to maybe answer some questions, to explain some of the things directly to this council. Would that be inappropriate, Mr. Prevost, or does
No, I don't personally think it's appropriate. I think that's part of the position, or the position that he holds as an MPP for our areas. I don't think it's, I think he would have enough time to notice, I guess, in regards to asking him to our May meeting, if that's satisfactory to everyone. I think it's appropriate. There is a lot of unanswered questions that we get on a daily basis, and I know I made some comments the other day in a press conference, but I'd like to hear directly from our MPPs with some of the answers in regards to what you're saying, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor McGillis, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I just want to commend Councillor Armstrong for coming up with that, support for the counties and for the municipalities within the region and the city of Cornwall. We are not being treated fairly 100%. And you said that during your press conference the other day, and I totally agreed with most of the things that you said. So I would be more than 100% willing to ask maybe the MPP and the MP to come to the meeting, because this is a federal issue too as well. I know a lot of the provincial regulations and policies and restrictions that were put forth were totally unfair for this area. And when you see that, in the other areas and other municipalities, or they have pharmacies that, the amount of pharmacies that they can give the vaccines, and across the border, I was just listening, at 18 years old, they were getting the vaccines in the U.S. So there's something not just sitting well with me and probably a lot of other people. So I would totally agree to have both MPP and MP Eric Duncan and Jim McDonnell to sit with us. And I have a lot of questions I want to ask, but I know they're doing their best, but it's just not it's not working on this end of the spectrum for sure.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I thank Councillor McGillis for his kind words. I think as well, especially when you think of the borderlines, the fact that what you, and I'm not separating it, but I will point out the fact of Mr. Warden, what you and Councillor McDonald have suffered with your councils being right on the Western Quebec border and finally getting some shutdowns. But what I think of, and in my day-to-day job, driving by, I drive by Lancaster almost every day, and seeing what it was like when you had the cavalcade of people from out of province coming in, and I know Alexandria suffered the same. We in North Dundas suffered some inundations from the city of Ottawa. You think of Morrisburg seeing New York license plates throughout it all, and finally, over a year later, getting our borders closed or having checkpoints, which are appropriate, and I think Quebec was appropriate to do them as well. And I think they're so late coming to the table. I think it's appropriate that Councillor McGillis said to invite MP Eric Duncan as well. And I think that he's doing a lot of work, as much as he can. The difference for me at this point in time, and I'm fine to see both of them, is that one is not sitting in power and one is sitting in power. And we need, I mean, no disrespect to Mr. McDonnell, but we need someone to stand up and fight for us now. And I don't see it happening. And I'd like to see everybody around this table ask some questions. I mean, and I'd also like to see, if there can be any light shed on what the intention for the budget's going to be. I mean, everyone sitting around this table, from what I've seen, all of our municipalities have indicated that we understand the burden that the taxpayer is under. We did at the SDG. I'm proud of the budget that we put forward, citing our taxpayers. I know what we did. We had an actual, not just a statistical number, but an actual reduction in the tax rate in North Dundas. I hope that the Ontario government is going to be recognizing that and understanding and getting some real relief for our businesses. We know that there's been programs put forward, but you sit with some of these people and I've seen them fill it out and the result is maybe $300-400 a month. We need real relief for our mom and pop shops. No more of this nonsense. I mean, there is Eastern Ontario, as we all know, is not within a stone's throw of Kingston. We are really Eastern Ontario. We represent Eastern Ontario, and we've had someone sitting at Queen's Park representing the ruling party, and I don't feel like we've had the proper representation now. I don't think that there's enough hard fighting, and I think we need to, anyway, I know you've agreed as a council, and I thank you, Mr. Warden, and I won't go on and pontificate, but I think we have some hard questions that we need to answer. Our people are scared and our people are hurting.
No, I think we all agree with you, Councillor Armstrong. Good points and well said. So we will request staff to invite Mr. Duncan and Mr. McDonnell at our next council meeting to give us an update in regards to where we stand and make sure they're prepared for many questions, and hopefully they have the answers for us at that time. Okay, Councillor Landry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If I may suggest, so we've got two of them sitting there. Also, possibly a third one could come into play, as in Dr. Paul. So I think that hopefully it would be a feel-good message coming through in a month from now and seeing some advancement in Eastern Ontario, but coming with the press conference that we had last week, moving forward with another month, I would see what the changes are, but potentially if they're not there, that's a third player that could be sitting there, because there's a lot of questions that could come from our medical experts as to where we stand 1 month from now. So that's a third invite that we could put out and have those three players sitting at the table at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. I don't have an issue with that. Councillor Armstrong, you're okay with that? Just
Yeah, it's certainly, and I think it's the more, perhaps the more the better. But I would like us to make sure that then perhaps Mr. Simpson could confer with you, Mr. Warden, and staff, and Ms. Castleman, and have it set up in a manner that we don't have, we don't have one in particular to like a bear pit where we could actually ask questions of the individuals and not have someone perhaps dominating that's maybe a little more tuned towards giving answers than others, and so we can actually ask the person the questions that we want to ask, which I'm sure we would, but it would nice to be like that, so no one can remain quiet and be actually questioned at this point in time. To your point, Mr. Landau, we all know that Dr. Paul has been an advocate at different times when the numbers were appropriate that some of our smaller businesses be allowed to open to 25% and some at some points 50%, and having things like hairdressers possibly see how they could work, and yet the provincial government has said no, and I know he's been at odds with it. So it would be nice to hear them all in the same room and hear what our provincial member would say when that gets spoken of. I mean, things like that. It's again, big box stores were allowed to, on their word, to stay open and to do the things that the province said they were supposed to do, which it became clear they didn't do, and our small businesses were not given the opportunity to fail. So yeah, get them all in the room and let's have this discussion.
Okay, I'm going to ask the question in regards to, I'm just wondering if a month is too long to get these questions answered. I'm just wondering if we should be calling a special meeting, maybe either sometime late this week or sometime middle of next week. Give them time to set up a meeting. So what's the favor from council? I'm in favor of having a special meeting, because if we're going to do this during a normal council meeting, we may not get all our questions answered. Councillor Gardner.
I would say as soon as possible, and I would say that the priority be for us to be able to ask questions of the provincial representative. If the others aren't available, I don't think we should be tossing dates around. It should be as soon as the MPP is available, because though that seems to be where the target is right now on the impact for our residents. Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I don't disagree. The only issue for me will be my daytime availability for the next 2 weeks is 0. So if we're going to do that, could we have it at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock or something in the evening?
I don't have an issue with that, Councillor Armstrong. We certainly want to work around you and respect that you're asking for this meeting. I'm just thinking that would be more appropriate to have it sooner than waiting.
I agree completely. And the only reason I didn't suggest that is because I am unavailable for the next 2 weeks during the day.
We will check the weather and we'll make sure it's a rainy evening, so that's it's not a 90-degree day. So, Councillor McGillis.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Warden. I 100% agree. An evening meeting like that would be more chance for all the visitors to come and not have a representative being that we're virtual to as well. So I would not want to sit and talk to a representative of the offices of the MPP and the MP, or even the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. I want to see that they're sitting up there and doing it at that time, and doing it virtual, I think is a good opportunity to have them with us. Sure.
Okay, thank you. So I'll ask staff to request a meeting with our local MPP and our local MP and Dr. Paul from the Health Unit. I think at night does make sense, only it won't take away from their schedules during the day. So we'll give them an opportunity for maybe a 6 o'clock meeting some night, either late this week or sometime in the middle of next week. I think would be most appropriate. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Just for clarity before Kim and I start working on that, as you know, scheduling 3 people can be at that level can be difficult. So I'm wondering, evening meeting, but would the prime, as Councillor Gardner said, would the prime focus be on our MPP if we can get him, and the others if they can attend? That's great, because I'm guessing that it'll be a real challenge getting 3 of them all the time. So is that okay with council? I'm seeing, or Mr. Warden. Okay, thank you.
I think that's fair, but I mean, put that request out there and we can always throw 2 dates. I mean, next Tuesday or next Wednesday, and see what happens in regards to that. But I think Mr. McDonnell is the one that's going to probably answer most questions, and maybe Dr. Paul, if we can at least get him, maybe, but try the 3 for sure. Okay, so we'll get back to you in regards to when that meeting will be scheduled. Thank you, Mr. Armstrong, for bringing that forward. And if there's nothing else, we'll ask for a motion to go into closed session.
It's moved by Councillor Byveld, seconded by Councillor McDonald, that council proceed in camera pursuant to section 239 2B of the Municipal Act 2001. Personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, human resources matter.
Okay, thank you. You heard the motion. All in favor? Thank you. I would ask members of council, the CAO and the clerk and our Mike from IT to stay on, please.